Said it's when.
The pages,
Can I touch your screen?
Yeah.
You can just go ahead.
Still, it keeps,
It does jump occasionally.
yeah, maybe it's not, it's just either way.
Mine has
To
jumped in
catch
the
up
past.
to-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no rhyme or reason why.
No.
It's just you'd be going along and all of a sudden.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's
Mind
not
of
just
its
me.
own.
It's not just me. This is nice.
So probably 30 seconds and then we'll be ready.
sure. I'm ready when you are.
Well, we'll wait till it's definitely 5:30 so we're not jumping the gun.
It's just like church.
As of right now, there's 16.
Say that all the time.
Not even just church, any meeting.
Anymore.
Alaska Cares ones.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call this Friday, June 12th special city council meeting to order. We are at the Seward Community Library Room, and I just might note that we're being broadcast on 91.7. We're also on YouTube as normal, and then Seward Civic Engagement. So if we could have, City Manager Lazzaros, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So let me just in advance thank everyone that's here in person. It's been a long time since we've been able to have a larger group. So thank you for coming out today. We appreciate it. Madam Clerk, could we do a roll call, please?
Tonight's roll call, Cease. Butts.
Present.
Backlund.
Present.
Kreitz.
Here.
McClure.
Here.
Osenga.
Here,
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is citizen comments on any subject except those items scheduled for public hearing. We have no items scheduled for public hearing, so Madam Clerk is running and getting the sign-in sheet.
Madam Mayor, the first person signed in is Tara Reamer.
Thank you. So where should she stand to get picked up the best for the audio?
I think it'd probably be work out if you just stand where you are. We should get some audio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And do I have a timer?
I'll time you.
Okay, I should be good. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight about the Alaska Sea Life Center. As I promised at Monday night's meeting, we have spent the week doing operational and financial scenarios to see what impacts the Sea Life Center can make on its own budget in the coming year. What we found is the best we can do is a $500,000 reduction, $500,000. We can cut more costs, but after that point, we lose more revenue than we cut in costs. At $500,000, we would reduce staffing by 38%, remove all support from our mission projects, and be closed up tight from November to February. There would be no education programs, and we could lose our entire science department. The animals would be well cared for, the building would be maintained, and we would continue to try to bring in revenue in any way we can. So that's the new data point, $500,000. So to back up and put this number in perspective, as a nonprofit, we manage a balanced budget. Revenue equals expenses. We are expecting to lose $2.8 million of revenue this summer by September. That's the new information I provided to you on Monday. That means we will be unable to pay for $2.8 million of costs over this coming winter. We must close the gap or the Sea Life Center goes out of business on September 30th. So we start with a $2.8 million gap. Subtract the $1 million PPP loan, the gap is now $1.8 million. Even if we cut $500,000 out of our budget, which is a severe cut with severe ramifications, we are now at a gap of $1.3 million. So I'm asking for two things, the same two things I actually asked for on Monday. First, we need as large of a grant as possible from your CARES Act funding. Second, we need a partnership with the City of Seward to help us find the rest of the funds we need. The $100,000 grant amount proposed in the draft that's in the meeting packet is not sufficient to show support and join us as a partner in our efforts to fill the gap. I ask you to commit $500,000. That is not nearly enough to meet our need. So feel free to make it a challenge grant where we have to raise a matching $500,000. $500,000 is 10% of the city's CARES funds. I understand that's a lot and that everyone is hurting. But think about the negative impact on businesses in this town if the Alaska Sea Life Center, the anchor tenant in downtown Seward, closes for good. The city's largest asset would become the city's largest liability, and local taxpayers would shoulder that burden for a long time to come. No one wants to see that happen. It's not a good scenario for anyone. So please consider our request for a grant of $500,000 and a real working partnership to fill this gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Next signed in.
Next signed in is Diane Dubuque.
Good evening, Diane Dubuque, Slippy 28, Sewardville Harbor. To continue with this conversation, as a small business owner, I'm looking at the $2.5 million that's allocated to nonprofits and small business. As the council is well informed, we have a lot of nonprofits in city limits. That's why our mill rate is so high. I'm concerned about nonprofits sucking up the majority of the funds from small business. Let me just put that out there. I'm looking at the way that the grants that were set up for nonprofits and for small business. On a different subject, I have an idea, and this is like far out there, okay? But in reality, the business that we're going to be seeing this summer is rubber on the road, okay? If anybody's listening to Anchorage Radio right now, you're hearing Homer saying, "Come to us for 4th of July." They're advertising big time. We're competing with Homer, Seward, Soldotna, Whittier for the limited market that we have in Anchorage. So my idea is, you take a percentage of this $5.3 million that you guys have, say $1 million bucks. This is just like round numbers, okay? And put it on the table, and we're going to discount Seward at 10% across the board. Hotels, restaurants, charters, everything, okay? And then advertise in Anchorage that Seward is open for business. We're discounting it to get you guys to come down here, and we want your business. So, like say once a week, I don't know what the timeline would be, you go to the city tax people and say, hey, I sold this amount of trips this week that were discounted 10%. They will pay you that 10%. The city gets its sales tax, the borough gets its sales tax, and we move forward until that pot is out of, that's why it would have to be done on a fairly short timeline, like say a week or 2 weeks, so everybody doesn't run out and people aren't left holding the bag. But I think even a 10%, the Breeze Inn gives my guests a 10% discount at the hotel, and the people are happy with that. They're getting some kind of a break. And we're going to have to do something to advertise Seward this summer because there's a lot of other municipalities that have the exact same idea as we do. So thank you very much for your time.
Madam Mayor, next signed in is Carol Tallman.
Hi, good evening. Carol Tallman, Inside City Limits. I, again, thank you all for, this is an arduous task to try to figure out how to use these funds properly for our community, and I really thank you in advance for, as it's going to take some time and ciphering, as they used to say in Beverly Hills. One of the things I would really like for the council to consider is using, and I don't know the economics of the situation, but using some of the funding across the board for utility customers. If you were to look down the line and say for the next 3 months, all of our businesses, all of our citizens, this would be an equal way to sort of mitigate some of the pain across the whole spectrum of the entire community. If, say 50% of the utility bills for every citizen, every business, all of the utility customers were to be covered by some of those funds. And again, I can't speak to the dollars and cents of that, but I would just ask for you to look at that. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, we have one citizen comment that was provided to me to read, and I don't know if you want to take the floor first, or...
Let's go ahead and see, is there anyone else that didn't sign in that would like to speak? And if you missed the first part, you can just stand in place and speak for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Craig Ambrosiani within Seward limits. I'm Executive Director of Seward's Community Health Center. I just wanted to comment on the proposed emergency COVID-19 rules. And we talked amongst some of the healthcare providers, primarily the Community Health Center. And we were pretty much in favor of what was proposed. We do know that once the virus hits an area, it's going to start spreading for a serious amount of time, for 10 to 14 days, without anybody knowing it. And that's our biggest concern. We're going to do what we can to increase testing and get more testing supplies so we can bump up our testing as a way to catch it and start tracking it before it spreads too far. But as long as we can continue social distancing and masking in the community, when it does get to our community, it'll slow it down to where we can react better and not have it knock out our town. People here are concerned about tourism, concerned about their businesses, but people have choices like we just heard. If Seward is inundated with the virus, people are going to go to Homer and go to other places that aren't full of the virus. So businesses that are concerned about the cost of masking or not taking precautions, they really need to look longer down the road and say, what if it does hit Seward and the people don't come because we're full of the virus? So take a look around, use your minds, and make good decisions about it. But we are in support of what we've seen so far on this plan.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Thank you. Madam Clerk, did you want to read the comment that was submitted, please?
The comment is from Carol Griswold. Dear Council and Administration, the COVID-19 recovery plan has a fatal flaw that should be corrected. As long as the statistics report the hometown of the infected person instead of where the person is or where they were infected, there is no real basis to track the disease, test, consider public health capacity, or declare an orange alert. Consider a hypothetical group of 10 Sewardites who travel to Seattle and subsequently contact the virus and are hospitalized there. The data would report 10 new cases in Seward and perhaps trigger the orange alert. Or if Memorial Day visitors from Anchorage brought the virus and were treated here, the data would not reflect COVID-19 in Seward but in Anchorage. This is totally erroneous. Another suggestion is to replace social distancing with physical distancing throughout the document. It makes a lot more sense.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Do I have a motion and a second?
I move for the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, can we have a vote, please? Or I'll just check. Is there any changes to the agenda? Madam Clerk, could we have a vote, please?
Voting on tonight's agenda, Osenga,
Yes.
Cease,
Yes.
Baklan,
Yes.
Butts,
Yes.
Kreitz,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
Thank you. Your agenda is approved. There are no consent items.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is item 6A1, Emergency Ordinance 2020-006. Madam Clerk, could you read the title into the record, please?
Emergency Ordinance 20-006 is adopting the city's COVID-19 recovery plan and the community outbreak rules that will be effective only during a local orange alert under that plan, and ratifying revisions to the city's emergency COVID-19 rules.
Is there a motion and a second?
I move for the approval of the COVID-19 recovery plan.
Thank you. Great, thank you. So I'll turn it over to administration. Did you want to present the plan or discuss any specific details?
So I know there was some discussion about the mask issue. I just got a text from the city attorney. She
just arrived in Seward, so she should be walking in any moment.
Okay.
And she did have some changes and amendments that she wanted to discuss about the modification. But I think in page 23 of your packet is where that the code orange and the upgraded rules. This is all proposed, so there is, just like all of our items, there is discussion and modification permissible. So that was an item I did receive numerous emails, phone calls. I did see some email traffic amongst the council about some things. I know that we went through this in the last meeting that we had on it, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to recap the entire plan again. So the directives were given, we did make those modifications. Holly was going to go over what those specifically were. I don't know if we want to have some discussion until she gets here.
I have a question, maybe we'll start off with that. So we're readopting our rules, correct? In addition to the code orange. What does it say specifically about work sessions?
So basically, electronic council meetings, this takes us back to a status, which is, again, if we have a major outbreak and the council determines we're going to activate the code orange, it would go back to a status where they don't actively do, unnecessary meetings, such as, all meetings are, can't really qualify them as unnecessary, but meetings which are non-essential, not, approving mandatory things that have to be done by statute. Things like some of our ancillary meetings that we have with the different groups that we have, those would be postponed. So we would go back to an electronic council meeting.
Okay. Just if the code orange was
Just
called?
only if activated, and again, we could revamp and revisit those rules where you asked that they go to a 48-hour notification. All of those things have been implemented and redrafted as requested and directed. So I don't know, I guess the attorney was going to go over those if you have questions, but if you don't, I'm going to see.
Are there questions for administration while we're waiting for the attorney? So essentially there'll be two, so when we look at this, when it has the emergency order revising the rules, right now we're under one set of rules. That stays in place.
Correct.
And so this new set of rules that we're adopting tonight, that will only be incorporated at the code orange.
Correct. And part of that was our discussion, we reached out to the clinic and the medical side to kind of determine, because I know that is a concern, is what triggers that. Obviously, it would come back to this body for activation. And that is a good question, if you have a large group of people, as suggested from Seward, that are not here, it goes off of your residency, and so, you might have, for instance, right now we have an active person that is positive that is not currently here, my understanding. So that, people are like, oh, there's a case here, and it's like, well, it may not be here. It may be someone in Florida that lives here.
But the good news is you'll be consulting with the healthcare professionals that have more access to that information, correct?
Correct.
So you'll be.
We only get the information
Yeah.
that's passed down.
So, I think that was a question, but you'll be able to be in consultation. There's no specific guidelines outlined in here because you'll be taking all those things into effect. Is that correct?
And it's really hard to ask for input to say, is it, what triggers the actual program, or is it more of a cumulative process of the testing ability, the caseload, the ability to handle patients, or maybe some other issue going on with the hospital or with the clinic. Those things all kind of combine really determine if we have capacity and ability to handle the threat.
Councilmember Hossein, I'm sorry, did you have your hand up and you just?
It's really hard to put like a number to caseload or to what types of cases, if it's isolated. For instance, I don't even want to say that out loud, but if it was in Spring Creek, which is probably the least likely place that we would see it in Seward, you know, if there's 50 cases in there, the likelihood of that spreading outside would be very minimal because of the procedures and because it is contained. So would that really trigger the whole community to be under a major alert? Probably not. And it's hard to have a scenario for every instance.
Councilmember McClung?
I just wanted to double check, and I still have it again. How long do businesses have after it's voted on by council to shut down?
So it would be 24 hours after full notification. So you actually have to convene and activate it and approve the order's condition, and then it would be 24 hours after the council actually approves that. It'd be, you know, if it was right now, it would be, you know, 6 o'clock tomorrow night. So businesses, you know, potentially would have the ability to utilize stock or offload product. That was a big thing in Anchorage, right? Because they closed all the restaurants and there was a lot of spoilage and product and things. And I don't know, you have to weigh those, is the health risk and the minimizing that versus the interaction with the business. And it's a difficult thing to do.
Councilmember Cease?
You say you don't feel that it'd be a big threat if over at the prison if they received it, but we do have people that work there. Will they have to be quarantined over there and not go home?
Right, so they have their own procedures. They do a lot of onboarding and screening every shift. So they take their temperatures, they have logs, they have a questionnaire every person that comes and goes. So that's probably one of the least likely places to see something like this.
That they wouldn't be able to come out with it.
So it's something, I was just using that as an example. We did meet with the acting currently the warden. So it's like, I don't like to use that as an example because I just brought it up because that is really well managed and a very low threat. Which if it was there, they would isolate, they would contain.
Until they found out.
And a
if
lot of
they had
places
it.
don't have the ability to do
Well,
that.
I understand that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any changes that folks would like to see proposed? I know, and do you know what the attorney wanted to change, or was it substantive, or?
I think it was just the request to discuss Rule 01, which is the facial coverings, and we did change it to Armstrong and Purge. That was what was requested. And I don't know if that's just something that, I don't know if you do or don't wish to discuss that.
Do folks want to discuss that?
Some people can't wear them.
Councilmember Cease? Well, and it does allow for that in that rule.
So all of the state layout for the current mandates, all of the going back, it's all very detailed in here, and a lot of that pertains to all types of scenarios and issues. It's hard to think, I don't think anybody wants to think about the reality of going back to a heightened condition like that, but I think it's important that we be prepared and know how to enact that and what triggers that. It's a good plan, even if it isn't COVID, if it's, you know, some kind of foodborne issue or some other type of major public health impacting type of a situation. This is supposed to have those types of plans enacted. I think prior to this, everybody thought, oh, you know, see in the movies, you don't really prepare a plan on what we had to do through this. So it's very different.
So,
I know she's not here, and I was gonna discuss this with her, but I know this is only to be implemented during the Code Orange. I personally feel that it needs to be stated that they're mandated. I mean, if we're at a point where we're shutting down businesses, the mask should be mandated. If we're at that point where we feel like it's such a threat that we need to shut down businesses. And that is my opinion, just based on the research out there and how it does decrease the spread of transmission.
raising your hand, Vice Mayor.
I'm almost raising my hand. How exactly does the Rule 01 on facial coverings read right now? Does anybody have?
Right now, we only have the recommendation, so again, it's not a mandate, it's not enforceable.
Because originally, we had all individuals in Seward must wear a cloth protective covering, and then, but now we're saying strongly encourage to wear. But it's also then, when entering a building open to the public, in the harbor, on the docks and ramps, in any setting where social distancing of at least 6 feet is not possible. So that doesn't mean like when you're walking your dog or that kind of thing, still. I mean, you're not suggesting.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying in a crowded area,
Right.
you can't maintain social distance. And I believe that's what, and that was what I had actually sent Holly an email in regards to if she could pull Anchorage's mandate on that currently, because it does state public facilities, crowded areas. It's not if you're walking your dog or if you're with your family.
And right now on page 23, it reads, where they cannot maintain a distance of 6 feet from individuals outside their household. Councilman, or Vice Mayor McClure?
So in Anchorage?
Yeah, and I asked Holly, I sent her an email this week and asked her if she could look at Anchorage's mandate.
Oh, so she's
on that.
bringing that.
I have not heard back.
Okay, okay.
Well, I'm tempted to, when did she say she was close?
So when you first initiated it, said I'm here. So I think that means it got us through.
And she knows the time, right?
Well, I'm tempted to, put this aside and go on to our next item of business. So do we need a motion for that, or, so I guess at this point, I'll move to, suspend what we're talking about and move on to our next item of business, which is, review and discuss the Federal CARES Act. So I'll need a second.
I'll second.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, can we have a vote on that?
Voting to lay on the table the ordinance. Buckland?
No.
Kreitz?
Yes.
Butts?
Yes.
Cease?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
The ordinance is laid on the table and you can take it up later in the meeting.
Okay, so let's move on to item B, other new business items, and that is review and discuss the Federal CARES Act, and that starts on page 188. So right now, I believe even under our current rules, we don't have the ability to necessarily have a work session. So this was called as a special city council meeting. So if there's no objections from the council, I wanted to have it be more, I won't say, you know, we're not going to do away with the rules, but more relaxed. Is there any objection? Like if we need to talk to a business or talk to a nonprofit, would anyone have objection to taking the opportunity to do that? Okay. And also, I know that administration has been working extremely closely with Kenai Peninsula Borough Economic Development District and also the Chamber, and Tim has been putting in a ton of time with his expertise with cities around the state and, you know, coming back to us with helping us with our plan. So I know that he is willing to present and kind of go through what we have in front of us today and the process and how this has been working. So Tim, if you don't mind, I'll throw it over to you.
Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for letting me come and chat with you all tonight. Just a reminder, KPED is not a government agency. I don't work for the borough, the state, or the feds. We're a separate corporation that assists in economic development across the Kenai Peninsula. We have played a rather large role with the Alaska CARES piece, working with the governor's office and the Commissioner of Commerce and the CEO of ADA to try and get as much money out into the communities and trying to assist with things. Having said that, I don't get a vote. So unfortunately, I've got a seat at the table, but I don't have a vote when it comes to the legislature deciding what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. Currently, we're in the middle of the small business piece, which is $290 million. I've been working with your chamber, and I've done a couple of different Zooms and things to try and help. And then also with the municipal relief, the $556 million. I can tell you that, Kenai has a program that we've worked with that they got approved here a week ago, that they're starting to push money out into the community. Homer, we finished that this past Monday, was approved by the Homer City Council. We're chatting with you guys today. The Borough Assembly, they had a workshop yesterday, and there'll be some things on the agenda this next coming Tuesday. Soldotna, I'm meeting with them on Thursday next week, and Seldovia on Tuesday. So the long and the short of it is, we're trying to help massage things. And I have to tell you, some of the comments by the community right off the bat, this is what it's going to take, is people thinking outside the box and getting ideas. From an advertising standpoint, you're spot on. The Kenai Peninsula, from our borough mayor on down, started a couple of weeks ago about, we're open for business, let's try and figure out what we can do. All the other incorporated communities and the unincorporated communities are currently working very hard to see how do we safely open things up and get people down here. I've said it before and I'll say it again. For us to think we're going to sit here and all of a sudden all these tourists are going to show up from the lower 48 and Europe and every place else, it's not happening. So we need to worry about and work with what we can work with, and that's the state of Alaska and a lot of those other folks. So some of the ideas, whether it be on the advertising side, Carol, with the utilities piece, Soldotna is playing with that idea, other folks are playing with that idea, and it's a great one. It really is. I think the community health piece, anybody that was involved with the assembly meeting here last week, over the last couple of weeks, Bruce Richards and the folks over at the hospital trying to get dollars in order to be able to purchase a testing machine, so we have one here on the peninsula. The tough part is it's 3 to 6 months out. It's not as if it's something that we can just go and pick up off the shelf. So that remains very, very important. So I just wanted to kind of shape things. I'm not here to dictate anything. I'm here to assist. I've spoken to a lot of folks in this room over the last couple of weeks. I was in town last Friday and met with a couple of the council folks and the mayor and the administration. And some of you probably know I've got a history with the Sea Life Center, so I talked with Tara to try and figure out what could happen short term and long term. So I've tried to listen to a lot of different people. And I think in assisting with the administration, with trying to put together some basic framework for this, I heard a couple of messages. I heard the phrase quality of living, quality of life. You people live in Seward because you enjoy it, you like what you've got. Citizens and community and business support. So I think one of the aspects of this $5.3 million is how do we best spend that right from the beginning that helps as many people as possible. The thing that you have to remember is that, unfortunately, no one's going to become whole out of this money. There's just no way. There's not enough money. On top of that, when this was put together, this was meant to assist the city's expenses during COVID. And I'm very, very proud of the Kenai Peninsula Borough and all the cities and what they've done, because they've listened to their community and they've listened to their businesses, they've listened to their nonprofits, they've listened to the everyday citizens, and they've chosen to put a decent amount of money on the street for businesses, nonprofits, and assisting the community. And I can tell you, that's something that's been done across the board. They've done it smart. They've made sure that they're going to be able to cover their expenses and the things to make you safe and to make sure the infrastructure is there. But on the other side, they've also listened to folks and made sure that those pieces can be tied in. The goal is to assist as many folks as possible. And one of the things that I hope that when you're looking at this, and I'm glad that some folks had the chance to take a look at it. I came back in town Wednesday night and met with administration and folks yesterday and part of today. The goal is for you to see yourself in it somewhere. You're not going to agree with the whole plan. There's no way for you to. You know, this is an emotional thing. This is a financial thing. But what we want to do is make sure that we're not leaving a group out. And that's one of the key things that from all the communities I've been to, we've really learned, and in fact, you know, right before I got here, I had gotten a phone call from the chair of House Finance that they want me to testify next Wednesday about some of the things that we've learned and some of the problems with Alaska Care. For example, if you bought your business at the end of last tourism season, you don't qualify for anything because you weren't up on March 11th, 2019. So it's things like that that I'm able to bring to a community and say, listen, do me a favor, when you're putting this together, make sure you try and include those folks. Now that doesn't help the people that are in the unincorporated areas because this only counts for the people in the city limits, in Seward city limits. Outside of Seward city limits, you're dealing with the borough. And we had an outstanding workshop yesterday with the borough, and they've got some pretty good plans. And all these plans, you see them tweaked a little bit here and there, but it's the same 4 or 5, 6 major areas that people want to make sure that are funded. So I think as we look at this, you want to try and remember, you know, what's happened since March 11th. You know, we've had a lot of changes, a lot of things. Not only that, but where you are today, and understanding that today is a lot different than a couple of months ago, and also where you'd like to be, whether it be in 6 months, a year, 3 years from now. And remember that all this stuff isn't going to happen overnight. And as you look around the room, the goal is not to pit one group against another. The goal is to try and help everybody. You know, I feel for the Sea Life Center. But I had a very, how do I want to call good discussion with Tara the other day, and basically told her, you know, I don't agree with you on that part. And this is why, and this is what you need to do to be able to help yourself. And I'm not just saying that to you, I'm here to help you with that. You know, one of the conversations I had with Tara today was, after our meeting yesterday with the Assembly and the borough administration, I brought the Sea Life Center up to the borough. And I said, there's only one facility that's the Alaska Sea Life Center on the entire Kenai Peninsula Borough. We need to figure out how the borough can assist the Sea Life Center. And that's not writing them a check. It's opening up the right doors and making sure that they're able to make the adjustments that they need. Because the last thing this guy wants is for her to come over and hand over the keys to him. That's not good for anybody. So we need to try and work together and figure out what that balance is. The other thing is, I want us to remember as you look at this, it's not an all or nothing. And you're not going to solve all the world's problems with something like this. But I think when you take the different areas, you know, the first responder and incident management team stuff, that's stuff that nobody could have planned for. Let's make sure that's covered financially, not only now, but also going into the end of December when these funds have to be expended by. And that's something that's got to get put back on his shoulders. I wouldn't just say, yeah, you just have $1 million, go and spend it. I hear the community. I wouldn't do that. And I spent time as a city manager. I wouldn't want that. I would want to be able to be held accountable and be able to say, this is what we need to spend that money on. Then when you start talking about business and nonprofit entities, different kinds of recovery grants, I feel very, very strongly that when you're talking about the businesses and the grants that we're dealing with, that has to be connected with the administration. The administration here needs to continue to build a relationship with the businesses here in town. The only way that happens is if this actually continues to work together. Having said that, I also know that when it comes to nonprofits and grants, the city is not the best person or the best group to go doling those out. They don't know or understand some of that stuff. They don't know that Mary needs her electric bill taken care of. Or Tom and Susie haven't had a good meal on their plate for, you know, a couple of weeks. What I am suggesting, and what I've talked to Scott and to Christy about, is the fact that you need to partner with one of the nonprofits to help get that money out into the community and make sure it's spent correctly. You know, Tony and I had a discussion about this the other day, is that the money doesn't do any good if it's sitting in the coffers. It's got to be able to be out there so that people can spend it and make sure that their quality of living doesn't continue to be negatively affected. You're going to have continued administrative things with this whole COVID. We don't know all the things that are going to continue to happen. I'm going to tell you right now, and I told this to the mayor and I told this to Scott, you guys got to figure out how to get a couple more staff members in there. They don't have enough staff to pull some of this stuff off. And I point that towards the council right now. I think the council needs to assist and figure out, you know, and again, the goal is not to grow administration, the goal is not to grow staff, but if it takes him, because he doesn't have staff, if it takes you 3 months to get that money out into the community, it's useless. You need people needing the money now. And that's one of the things, you know, I pulled the numbers for Christy yesterday. You know, there's 16 active applications for the Alaska Cares money right now, as we're sitting here today. There's been over $30,000 since a week ago Monday put in people's bank accounts, business bank accounts, from the Alaska Cares. So it's working, and it's doing something, and it's money that's actually getting into the community. I know from a bigger picture, there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and some people are concerned it hasn't rolled out fast enough. But I can tell you, here on the peninsula, we've got several communities that are really doing very well so far with making sure they get those dollars. The other part is when it comes to individual assistance grants, whether it's with the electric bill, whether it's with any of your utilities, or just making sure the food bank or some folks, you know, are taken care of, again, that's important. That can't be left off the table. But then the last part is, you have to remember, we had the earthquake, then we had the fires, and now we have this. We've had 3 major disasters 3 years in a row. For us to sit here and think we're not going to have another disaster is foolish. It's not if, it's when. So we need to make sure that we've got money set aside not only for resiliency but also recovery, because we've got to come up with a plan. I can tell you that KPED is working with the federal government right now not only to do a comprehensive economic development strategy, a new one for the next 5 years, but also an economic resiliency plan to try and see what did we learn and how do we help it, how do we fix it. I'm going to pick on Jason for a minute right now. I talked to him over the last couple days and I said, the chamber can play a great role in some of this stuff. I can tell you, I've had more people call me and say, Tim, I didn't realize I wasn't allowed to spend my deposits. You know, I had a great trip at Christmas time. I went to Florida, I went to Miami, I went to Hawaii or whatever. Then I come back and we got this thing and now I got to pay back deposits and I don't have any of that money. So some basic instruction of what you can do and what you can't do. How to read, you know, as where I'm helping people fill out these documents. How to read a profit and loss. How to read a balance sheet. Those are basic things that I from. And we need to engage our chamber through some of these dollars, and it's not something that's got to happen tomorrow, but it's got to be part of a plan. It's got to be part of what's going to happen the next couple of years in order for Seward to continue to grow. And it's not just here, it's all over the peninsula. And I can tell you that I've had this discussion with a variety of folks, using your chamber, using small business development, use me, you know, but we need to be able to do that. So when you look at the CARES Act funding and kind of where you are, there also are a lot of restrictions of what you can't do. So I think I've talked plenty. I just wanted to lay it out for you but this plan's got to be yours. It's not mine, it's yours, and you each have to see yourself in it. But you all don't have to see yourself in the same spot. Tony might see himself over here with this piece is real important to him. John might see it somewhere else. You know, that's what makes the plan. And I'll shut up. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Tim, that's great. So once again, the plan starts on page 188. And just to clarify for folks, we're talking about the plan today, getting input, but we're not adopting this plan. So we're gonna talk about it, and then you'll see it come up again and have another, chance to provide comments. But to the city manager, I don't know, thank you, Tim, that was a great overview of what's been going on and what this looks like. Did you want to talk about any specifics that were, I know it's very close to the Kenai plan, it's practically identical, but obviously we have different funds in the borough or other cities, so do you want to talk about that specifically?
So that was kind of the preliminary direction I got, was to use what Homer is doing, to kind of use what Kenai's built. It's been challenging because just this week, Kenai was told, our last component here, there's over $1 million allocated, and that's to individual assistance grants. And our intention there is to put the money into nonprofits, to have it distributed to individuals. But then we learned that's potentially something we can't do at this point. So I think that's a lot of the quandary with putting this together quickly and properly, is it just continues to be a learning lesson for most of us. I do, really appreciate having that assistance with Tim and Capehead and Paul and his staff, and it's nice to have a template to build from, but that doesn't mean it has to work for our community and our people. It doesn't mean that that's what we want to do or that works for us. I think, one of the things I really see is we had their breakouts, and I tried to look at, what's reasonable for the city to cover our outlays, our additional COVID-related infrastructure things we had to build, things we put money into that we expended that were not budgeted. Those kind of things, I try to diminish the percentages and look more at the business element. Again, without our business, the chamber lives through us, and they live through their membership, but they live through the city and the CPB funds, and that's a huge issue for next year. How do we do the shuttle and the chamber? They're gonna need some kind of additional influx of assistance. They can't go away, they're a vital part of what we do. So I try to channel that. Tim and I and the group and yourself and the vice mayor and several of us, the borough mayor, we had, just Thursday and on Wednesday we had an hour-and-a-half long discussion about what each of us is doing and what's working and what's not. And different communities, it's hard to just roll something out and lay it out during these times, because you don't have the ability to just drop a big meeting of people into a room and have a discussion. So talking to our nonprofits and talking to our business people, it's not conducive right now. But I do know, from a nonprofit, Tim, provided our nonprofit list. There's roughly 9 major nonprofits in our community. That's 106 in Kenai. So obviously, looking at Kenai's model and what they're doing, it's one of the first. It's easy to look at what others have done. They're disproportionately different. They have a lot more numbers and a lot different array than we do. So we really only have 9 major nonprofits here. One of the discussions that all of them came up with is, what about daycare? Most of the people, I haven't really seen that as much in Seward, but for most of the municipalities, they have employees, and if you have children from 0 to 7 or 10, daycare is kind of a non-existent thing right now. So what do you do with that person that's a single family mother or father that, what are they gonna bring their 3 small children into the office? That's not really something that we can do. So there's a lot of accommodation and changes and things happening. But I think, we have to keep that in mind as we allocate funds out, and, we're not gonna be able to help every single person. One of the themes that the discussion kind of came from is you have to create a baseline of who gets funding, right? And so all of us look at, that's based on income in general. And the tiered structure, even though it's proposed here and it's kind of emulated, it's different. A tiered structure is kind of an equitable way to roll it out. But they based all the minimums on $50,000. And so if your income here is under $50,000, that's probably not realistically your only income, because most people, if you're making $50,000 as a business entity, if you're making 10,000, that's probably a hobby or an additional income or a second job. So they did base that on the $50,000 threshold. And then it kind of climbs from there. And I mean, this is a discussion, so we need direction, and as a group, we need to come up with, looking at how the individual assistance isn't really gonna roll out. Maybe it makes sense to look at our numbers and double the expenditures, or, we're really gonna have to look at what's the impact and what are the needs in the community.
Can I ask a quick question? So, are individual assistant grants allowed, yes or no? And when will we know the answer to that?
Well, what we know right now, that, well, we know that they would be considered a sub-recipient if we give a nonprofit sorry, I know it's hard to hear. So if we give a nonprofit a grant to contribute to individuals, then there are tax implications, there are regulation implications, both how we execute and how they execute the program. So I don't know that it's prohibited, it's just more difficult, there's more challenges associated with that than we originally would have anticipated. I think that is, I don't know what the City of Kenai plan is, but I think they are not going to go that direction. So I think there are individual programs we can do instead. There are ways to, for example, there's mortgage assistance, there's rental assistance, there's utility fee abatement assistance. There are programs that can be direct to the individual, and there are ways to work with the nonprofit. But because we're early on in the process, and when I say that, I mean all of Alaska, because there is absolutely movement there. I don't think anyone has actually expended a payment yet. They've received them, but I think July will be the first time, and that might be Fairbanks, if I'm correct, who will be sort of the first one to go that direction. So people are still building their plans, building their committees, deciding what they're going to do, and then figuring out how to execute them. So as we go through those steps, they talk to auditing, they talk to IRS, they talk to the state of Alaska, they talk to each other, and we get more direction. I think that some of the more unique programs I've seen that go through a nonprofit to get to the individual are trying to plug those holes, but none of them have rolled them out formally or officially yet. So I think as you consider this plan and you say, yes, this is what we want to do, I think it's clear that you intended that $1 million to be as direct to the individual as possible within the management structure you have. And I think your administration can execute that. It's just, it may not be executed exactly as originally intended.
Mr. Dillon?
I was going to say exactly what Holly just said. The bottom line is, you come up with your philosophy and the idea of this is who we want to wind up having the money at the end. This is who needs to get the money. Where the problem is, and no disrespect towards my attorney friend here, but part of our problem right now is you got the Department of Law saying one thing and the commissioner saying something else, the head of ADA, and realistically, the bottom line, I had a conversation with the commissioner yesterday, and we were like, okay, what can't you do? And it was like, Tim, the cities or municipalities can make up whatever rules they want. I'm like, okay, well, then if we can do it, what are we having this conversation for? So they just can't, there's too many, and again, no disrespect towards attorneys. Attorneys are giving you their opinion, trying to keep you out of trouble, but I can bring 10 attorneys in here and you're gonna get 10 different concepts. So, especially with something brand new like this, so you've got to trust your attorney and make sure she knows what it is, what's the end product gonna look like, and then she'll help you make sure you get from here to here without getting in trouble in the middle. Because it's a moving target, it's changing.
Okay, well, let's start working on some things.
Yeah.
Because we've talked a lot, let's start really getting down to it. What does council want to see? Are there questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilmember Butts.
Okay, so first off, the question of the city review committee. How is that going to be formed?
So I can tell you, a lot of the other cities, they hire a person short-term. They're using Larry over in Kenai, but they have you can use a tax person, a consultant, you could hire, if you have staff capacity, we need to have some type of person overseeing the project. So we're gonna create a fund, we're gonna have different pools of money. The financial part is easy to create. The problem is we have to have a really clear, succinct format and rules with an appeal process in place, because we don't wanna be like, oh, the city said that Joe's good, but Jill is not getting the same, it needs to be consistent and the rules have to be very clear. So a lot of the things in this project, now you have to live in Alaska to qualify for funds through our city program, but you don't necessarily have to live in Seward. Your business has to have a business license here. You could be delinquent on taxes, because there's a lot of people right now that are behind, their payments on utilities, that type of thing. But there needs to be there's a W-9 required for this program. We need to know what the borough taxes are. If you don't have a way, there's loopholes that Tim and all these different groups we've been working through as collaboratively, like, what if you don't have, if you just started your business and you don't have that full year of demonstrating what your income is? How do you provide something that's acceptable so that you can qualify and get help?
Okay, so coming back to my question then, how do we form a committee? I think there should be a member of the council on the committee. I'd like to do it, but I'd like to have somebody from not just a separate group, a committee of people that don't know anything about our city in that committee making those decisions.
Most of the others have a committee where it's reviewing the process. So Homer, they're not doing any of that. They're like, we're gonna give $3,000 to every business, and it's a flat program. If you qualify, you get a check, they make a list, they print it out, they get to W-9, see you later, done. I don't think that's gonna work with the diversity of ours.
Because in our document, we have, if we do run out of funds in that section there too, then we have to make adjustments there too, and we look at that too. And I think that's what we have to look at here too, of having somebody that's from this group that's in that.
But honestly, a review committee, I would think would be, it sounds like you're thinking about having a contractor look at it, and the review committee is gonna look through what the council puts in place for the requirements.
Right,
I don't know that we wanna be on the committee in case we need to be part of the appeal process. Or what would that look like?
The criteria is clear. The review committee is more like some group of people that review and submit and process, and then they turn it into our finance, we issue checks. The review committee is a term.
It should not take more than 30 minutes for somebody to go from beginning to end unless there's something missing. It's a check the box kind of thing. Your goal is to give the money out. Your goal is not to say no, your goal is to say yes. So that's the key, and to do it as quickly as possible is and probably Homer's probably the most liberal program that's out there right now, but they've got 1,600 business licenses within the city of Homer. And that's what they were trying to do. Is when we sat down with them, I had no idea they had that number of business licenses. So that's why we were trying to figure out, okay, how does this all work? So bottom line is they're figuring that they're gonna get X number of businesses that are gonna apply, and everybody's just gonna get a $3,000 check.
So again, review committee, I think what you mean by that is, because it's just gonna be a checklist, the review committee is just gonna be staff. Like, they're not gonna sit, because part of that is they're not gonna judge the need or the use of the money.
Process committee would be more appropriate. Process group to take in the applications, answer questions, and get them digested and processed.
So the question was, how is that committee formed, and who makes that committee?
Right, and so in Kenai, it's Paul, his financial person. They have some volunteers, and they hired a sub to kind of oversee that.
So how would we form a committee?
So I have a financial person I'm trying to contract as our interim, and that person is capable with some staff. I have a couple people on my team. The review part is not essential. Once we have the process identified and approved, the format, you send out the forms, it's just a matter of processing the application.
So it would be the contractor, not yourself, because you're who they would appeal to.
Right, that's
So
the
it's the
essential part of it.
contractor and then staff.
or some staffing, it might be our staff, it might be a person we bring on as a temporary, it'd be someone qualified to go through the processes. I don't know what the numbers are gonna look like on this.
Okay, so maybe the reverse of this. What would you like to see? You really do want someone from
I'd like to
council?
have, well, if not really something from this, from this, like you say, because of I didn't think about for the appeal process, but somebody from the city of Seward that has part of that too, rather than just having someone else out
We're
there.
not just shipping it out. So
Right.
That's kind of against the recommendations of all the groups, is don't just say, hey, here's our care stuff, this sub's gonna do all of it.
It's an opportunity for you to build your relationship with your businesses, so you don't want to just pass it off to somebody. My suggestion, quite honestly, is give this guy some direction, tell him next meeting, I want, give us the infrastructure. What is it,
Yeah, tell
the
me
committee,
what-
the this, the this.
What would you,
End of
Councilmember
conversation.
Buckland, what would you like to, who would
I
you
would
like
like
to
the
see?
chamber to do it. I think they're in touch with who the businesses are and what our businesses are like. I think when you take 1,600 business licenses that are in Homer, we require business licenses of all 4th of July vendors,
Yep.
anybody who comes in the winter time to do craft show or any of that, so.
I asked the clerk today and we have 594 business licenses.
Include that, and that includes the transient businesses like 4th of July. The 4th of July only business permit, is that included in there too?
Yeah. Anything that's been issued or is currently underway.
Thank you.
So, and that's where we go back to what the requirements are, the eligibility.
But
Councilmember Seats.
if you have somebody that comes in here and sets up here, they're also at the fair, they go to all these other things, and so if you look at their tax return, it's gonna show that they've
They're
made
not
the 50.
residents.
So I think, hold on, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves in the
Yes,
details.
so-
The format is what you're trying to discuss about approval. We're not gonna review all the licenses. The criteria in here, if you are a qualified business, you have a business license, they're in there, they're right here on.
So the exclusions start on page 190.
Yeah. So literally, like all those transient vendors, small business, these have parameters. If you don't have a revenue of $50,000, you don't qualify. And like I talked about at the beginning, that's probably not your primary, it may be, but if you want to go down to 30, or, that's something that is a moving target that I need direction on. Is this good, is it not? It tiers up as you have more impact. So instead of being here, everybody gets the same, it's based on the threshold of, okay, this business brings in $1 million, this business brings in $5 million worth of sales. There's outliers, there's lots of things like
Councilmember
corporate.
Buckland.
There's a question.
Go ahead.
Net or gross?
So again, if you read through this, there's different ways with the community. Some businesses.
Total
they-
gross is
yeah,
how
they
it's
don't-
currently being proposed.
It's really easy if everybody has their tax forms done and they're like, here's if I qualify, but not all of them are in that position.
Total gross for 4 quarters as reported on their tax returns to the borough. Yes?
What if you're just a brand new business and you just haven't even started and you haven't gotten any money from anybody,
All
any help at
businesses
all?
must have been in existence as of January 1st, 2020 to
And I
qualify.
was, and I was set to open April 1st.
So that's what's currently being proposed.
And I've not gotten help from anyone, any
Ma'am,
money.
that's what we're doing tonight. That's what we're getting that set
But,
up.
I sit here and I listen to you talking about hiring other people, so you're gonna tap into that money to hire people to figure out how to give it to us, so you're giving us less. And then you wanna give $500,000 of it to the Sea Life Center, and you're talking about one person, one business that's struggling to run 2 storefronts, who hasn't gotten anything from anybody.
So I might also say after this, you should talk to Tim Dillon, because KPED or the chamber, they can help you connect to all those different programs that are out there.
We've talked to all of the different programs, and they've all said no. So,
I don't believe that that's accurate. I'm not here to argue with people, but I can tell you that just from what you've told me, just from what I've heard, if that's accurate, I believe that we can probably try and find something within the Alaska Cares program to help you, but again, I don't believe you and I have spoken. And
We
I
haven't
am-
spoken.
Okay, and I am the Alaska Cares person on the Kenai Peninsula, so until
No,
you
we
hear.
talked to our local banks.
Okay, this doesn't go through the banks, so.
So let's go to Councilmember Butts.
So the big question is, and we're getting back to the format of what we're looking at tonight too. Has anybody put a date on this? Applications by this time?
Yep, applications
We're gonna
by
sunset
September
this.
25th.
Has other people done this too then?
Oh,
What I'm
other
saying?
communities? Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
communities done this?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so when we look at now at the end here too, one of the things I would like to see as part of this format then too, is as we're accepting this there too, is that I wanna spend all this money. I don't want to have, when we send out these applications, we have 10 applications for this pot of money. I want to spend all that. I don't want to come up with the end here too. Now, if we exhaust those funds, then we have to lessen the amount of people in that group. But it doesn't have something in here to say, if we don't exhaust those funds, yeah, I want to spend it.
So
But-
you don't get additional monies until the first check is 80% spent. You have to
Right.
get through the first check. There's 3 equal payments. And so the city of Seward is allocated $5.324 million. We only get 1.3 in the first round. Until we expend 80%, we don't get to go into the next piece of that.
Yeah, but I think you need to hear that council
Yeah.
doesn't want any of that money
Right.
left on the table.
Correct, so we're not looking to stick it in a mutual fund. A lot of places are currently just, they're not ready to roll this out like we're trying to implement. They're just putting in mutual funds, storing it there because the rules are changing, the game is changing. I think the ones that did do individual funds, if they come back and find that's not allocatable, how do you cover that in your budget if you expend $3 million that's not allowed to be counted? That's an additional outlay that we just cost the taxpayer. So that's why we've been cautious and we're trying to learn from these rules. We don't want to make a negative thing on the taxpayer either.
So let's back up, because you said something, so page 191,
Right.
the application period will be open till September 25th, 2020. The city review committee will verify the information on the applications come in and will distribute the funds in coordinated batches as received. So we're not gonna wait till the end and distribute the money, those will be batched. But, let's do this better. Let's go through this line by line and refer to pages, because we're all over the place. Did
Okay.
you have a
I
comment?
just had a question as far as if you have enough applicants that exhaust the money there, and then you have applicants that haven't, so it's a first come, first served basis, is what you're saying. If the funds are exhausted, they're exhausted.
That's why it's critical, like if we're gonna allocate, let's say we do this 2.5 million to the businesses, if we look at the numbers and you only have 30% of that, you're never gonna get there. So we wanna make sure as we go into this, the last part is for recovery. If we don't have recovery, we need to make sure if we get into the later November, that those monies are going to the businesses, they're going to our partners, they're not gonna sit there as an
Councilmember
admin.
Cease and then Councilmember Duckworth.
To Ms. Connell's comments there, when she said we're gonna hire people, the people that are already working for the city, they're not gonna get extra to do their job.
Correct.
Okay, so in this one that you're planning on hiring as a temp, or whatever we wanna call that person, they will just get the same amount, if they were working on this or not, correct?
Yeah, so a lot of the places bring on specialized staff just to do this type of program, and they're just contract short-term employees for a contract amount.
Is that what, this one that we've been talking about?
Oh, no, that's different. That's for, we're looking at, the council directed me to hire an interim financial.
For that.
That person may or may not be associated with being able to do this, and that would be a contract. I think.
I can tell you too, that, number one, it's illegal, the way the monies are set up and things, for anybody to get more money to do this, okay? So you can't get a bonus out of it, you can't, no. The other thing is, I firmly believe that there's somebody in your community that's not working that we can train to do this. That's number one. If there's a job on the peninsula, the peninsula people need to be hired. So you have my word that I will work with him to find somebody here in our community to be able to do something like that. I think the big thing that you guys need to really do tonight is accept a format or a concept more than anything else. And then, heck, you're paying him to do his job. You go ahead, and we will like this concept, this is what we don't like, this is what we do like, bring it back to us, you got 10 days, bring it back to us, and let's get it done. That's, to me, or else you guys are gonna be back and forth for the next 8 hours.
Councilmember Buckland?
I'll go back to you and let's
So-
go back to them.
So let's start with the overview, page 188. The city's ready to receive $5,324,326. All of this on page 188 is just background information. Then when we get to 189, like, this is pretty key. The proposed city allocation. So $1 million to first responder and incident management team payroll and related emergency expenditures. $2,500,000 business and nonprofit entity recovery grants. $250 CARES Act administration and non-payroll expenditures. $1,074,000 on the individual grants, and that's the piece that sounds a little squirrely if it's gonna be allowed or not allowed. And $500,000 for city resiliency and recovery. So, what do folks think about the breakdowns? Councilmember Buckland?
I had a question on what was our current first responder and incident manager team payroll expenditures currently?
So we don't have a tracking on that. We're gonna go back and accounting's gonna capture all the expenses. I can tell you that Soldotna, we were open roughly a month and a half, 2 months before they even opened the city up again. They did have some emergency. Their fiscal year is end June 30th, which is a couple days from now. And they're spending $2.5 million of their assets for their staff and their.
But they got more money. So my question is.
But that's what I'm trying to say is they were not
The
open.
$1 million that you're asked, that you put together here.
Correct.
How do you see that being spent?
It's gonna be itemized through all the things we've expended, so all the supplies, all the meetings, all the time, everything that has had to happen from the emergency operations and all of the meetings, and, I mean, you could count all of the IT type of
That
stuff.
also that includes the $250,000 CARES Act administration and non-payroll expenditures?
Those are different. That's to oversee the implementation of this project. It's to oversee the safety of future. So the thing you have to think about is we're not setting this all out to capture what's happened. This has to take us till January 1st. So what happens in 2 months if we have the hospitals got inundation, we have all this equipment, we have all these additional businesses closed? How do we regroup and how do we cover those
So
costs?
let me just clarify, so the million is for what we've done so far and what you're planning. So before we adopt this, we need to know if that's an accurate number.
So that number, if you look at the Kenai plan,
Yeah.
and I was directed to use their categories, because that's what the grant categories are. Our numbers are 70% of their numbers. So that would have been $1.7 million if I just went with what they're doing. So that number's been halved almost.
Yeah.
And then the number for business, they're roughly doing $3 million for business. Ours is still almost 2.5. And then, is that fleshed out? These are just estimates.
Yeah.
So those numbers, if we don't get that, if we get too much, we want to put all this money in the hands of people that need it. And I don't know, Tim was going to kind of explain how part of that being is the city has these huge unencumbered budget issues that we did budget for as well.
So I think to Councilmember Buckland's point, before we adopt this, we need to know those numbers. So I think that they could just pull up that coding with the accounting system, right? And what they
This is
planned.
all across everything we've done since March 11th until today.
I know, it just felt like if we came to here today, we should have had something saying, by this time, we've spent this amount of money on first responder and incident training, or things that we need, and we can estimate in the future why we need $1 million.
I would guess it's 3-ish, 2 million plus. Kenai's wasn't open, they spent 2.5. We've been open most of the time. It would be real easy for us to cover the $1 million without an issue, because we've expended way more than that.
Okay. So, and I would say if not, we needed to have this meeting as quickly as possible, but it would be good to have better numbers before it's adopted.
Sure.
Would
Well,
that work for you, Councilman?
Before the resolution or ordinance is adopted, I would have to have additional accounting staff and people to come in and help. And I don't want to get into doing that. Do you want to roll the program out or do you not? If you want a lot of accounting, we're gonna itemize, we have to do that to submit for reimbursement. That's gonna take,
Well, I know we have the attorney bills, and I think people have been coding their timesheets, so maybe just as best of an effort as you can before this is adopted. Yes.
I hear exactly what you guys are saying, and I agree with what you're saying. If you would like me to, I can assist Scott with, because the concept is the, kind of the first step. But then plugging in the numbers, I think, is gonna be very important. And I think there's a way for Scott to come up with the dollars, and having spent time as a city manager, I can help him with that and pull stuff from other places. And, you know, you give us a date of when you need it by, and that should be presented. I agree with you, Tony.
Councilmember Cease.
Well, if you haven't coded that stuff separately in payroll, why don't you ask your employees how many they put in?
well, so a good example is in our discussion in the borough and all the managers, there's no IRS definition of what's significant. So is that 1%, is that 67%? What is qualified? We have to define that. So that's, and for you to have this all done before you think about approving it, that means it has to all be done and in the packet by noon on Tuesday.
Well, but I think it.
I'm just trying to tell you in order to.
But here's what I have to say about that. People make up budgets, right? Would they have to come up with their department budget for like budget time? So I'm sure they can say, this is what we feel like we've spent, this is what we're gonna spend. I mean, it's.
Sure. I mean, if I was just gonna go off of like the model we copied, I'd say 1.7 million is pretty easy to capture. So I can come up with, you know, easily fill that budget with $1 million, no problem. We've expended at least close to double that. I don't know how to put that in terms
Councilmember
of.
Kreitz.
I feel like adopting this as an overall concept is doable, and then going back, and if he's taking it off of Kenai, looking at their population and their budget and taking a % based on our population and our budget, and giving us a rough estimate is great. I think the numbers can come later and they can be adjusted. But adopting the overall thing is what needs to happen.
Well, I think
for
the public's,
businesses.
I think the public's concern is they just want to, I mean, I think my personal feeling is we put as much into the community as possible, so it would be nice to know what the city expenses are. Because we don't want to leave any money on the
Yeah,
table.
no, and I agree, and I think that needs to come, definitely, but I would not want to hold this up for the city to be able to get these funds by any means.
Let's take a minute, we're just gonna go through all these numbers and then we'll get to the public. So, does that cover that for you, Councilmember Khan? $2,500,000 for business and nonprofits entity recovery grants. Comments, questions?
I thought they were pretty low on the business ones, but I mean, numbers come later, right? So,
Well, I think, so I did a quick calculation, even if we gave all 594 business license made right in that middle 5,000, we'd be just over that. I think it's 3 million or something, so we might be okay. So the $250,000, so that would be hiring a contractor to work on getting the funds distributed? Part of that?
A piece of that. So it's, so again, we tried to tweak the model that's out there. And these are the categories that are expended to under the grant. So it's pretty straightforward, but it's, expenses include purchases to improve the health and safety, city employees, residents due to the disaster. All expenditures would obviously be itemized under procedures, but it's things like, what about the leases and all the setting up with the health clinic in Providence, and it's all the things related to CARES Act, administration and payroll. I guess, you know, it's hard, we're emulating something that's already created. When you start looking at this, it's hard to look at it as a city because we're trying to allocate as much of this to people that need it. The other side of that is we're trying to talk to the borough because the whole 5.3 million is the projected loss the city's gonna have in revenue. So all of these money you can think of as shortfalls to the taxpayers for programs we're gonna do anyway. So if you give it, you could give 100% out, right? But then how are we gonna cover some of the shortfalls from this ourselves with the decreased revenue. So that's where the act is really set up to cover, like Tim said, none of us are gonna get whole. So, I mean, I'm trying to project it in the way that others have set it up and try to be equitable under the act. It's up to you how we allocate that.
Yeah, that's why we're going through this. So the next one is the individual assistance grants at $1,074,000. When will we know, and how can we distribute those funds to individuals?
Are you asking?
Yeah, because I'm hearing that it's maybe not legally possible, or it's fine, or,
Well, if you're asking me, so as your attorney, if you said, we want to give $1 million to individuals, then I would go research and figure out how you do that in a way that you can do it efficiently and you can do it legally. And make sure, when I say legally, what we don't want is to have this money clawed back. That is not what you want. So we want to get the right answer. And what we know now is there'll probably be hoops the nonprofit and corporations and the city have to jump through in order to go through them to set up individual programs. That might be okay. You know, we just realized, I think, the municipal attorneys as a whole, and really from these communities that are rolling out programs, so which is about a third of the communities, where they really have decided what they're gonna do, and they laid those out. We're watching and learning from them, which is great, but what we're learning is there are some red flags coming up, so we gotta figure out how to navigate those. I don't know, what I would say is, once you guys decide on the program that you want to go with, and if we have the go-ahead to just say, you know, we're gonna have to, or we'd recommend, or I'd recommend you change that program to do X, Y, or Z to get you to your end game, then I think we can do that fairly quickly on that one, because that flag's been raised. Can I guarantee there won't be other flags that come up? No, but I think just by being on it, paying attention and thinking through these things as your program gets finalized, you'll be okay and we can react fluidly. I think another thing to think about is, because I think this is on the sort of macro level, if you are okay with the nonprofit corporation payment payout, think about whether or not you want to put any restrictions on the nature of the nonprofit. And I only say that because things like homeowners associations are nonprofit corporations, and that may not be where you want the money to go. It may be, but so in that way, I think having, Councilmember Budd said that he might be interested in, it sounded like you were really looking at the program itself and the allocation and how those things, having one or two of you meet, be a committee or meet with Scott and really fine-tune the program that you as a council say, this is overall where we want to go, and put a very tight deadline on that. So I know you really want to get these funds out there.
are you talking specifically to the nonprofit piece, or all in general now?
Well, I think you want to look at all of them. These programs are dollar amounts with some basic, let's pay out here, let's pay out there, let's do a prorated amount, but let's have an application period. Some of this stuff, for example, when there's money left, if there's money left, because everything the city does has to be itemized, so they're not taking a dollar they don't spend. It's not gonna happen, it can't happen. That money, I think as a council, really wanna make sure that gets pushed back into the community, so you should have express ways of doing that written into your program, so that you know it's going, and you know it's going through your application process committee, and you're knowing, and you know how that's gonna be prorated or applied. Those are big questions. I think that your plan proposes all of those things, but in a more, it's a more generalized approach. And I think council member input on those pieces is good. I think that's a good step for you guys to take, and I don't think it'll slow the train down.
So, which is different than going through applications, though.
Right, absolutely.
Councilmember Buckman.
So I had a question from the early email guidance that was given, was that it could also be used as direct stimulus payments to all citizens. So if you're saying that the possibility of, like, you can't, it might not be able to go to a nonprofit for bias or for then they review who gets money and who doesn't get money and how much money they get. If we had just said we took that 1.2 0.074 million and said, we're gonna give it to the citizens and give it, you know, at that point, be what, $500 a person, you know, and could that be, you know, say we did that and then some people said, well, I don't want that $500, I don't need it, can you give it back to somebody else and redisperse the funds in like a second round after? Is that has any other city thought of something like that? Is that legal? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, from my research on this, I think that is legal. I think it's doable. I think individualized programs are doable. I think a lot of communities have found that they're worried about the distribution and administration of those processes, but the simpler they are, the easier they are to administer. And I think that it's worth considering. One of the most unique ideas I've heard in the community was creating sort of a business list for all the community businesses that want to participate in their sort of, you know, like City Bucks program, all right? And so individuals were given a $500 City Bucks check, and then they work in daycares and restaurants and bars and retail stores, and so it's putting it back into the community. That was very, I thought that was a very innovative approach, similar to what you're saying. But those are, each of those do carry administrative components we would have to look at, but I think they all are permissible use of the funds.
Or we could use them to pay electric bills.
Absolutely.
Or water, sewer.
And we actually do have, I think it's, I want to say Sitka, I'm not positive. We do have one community that is doing a utility bill subsidy or a payout, and they're specifically targeting the utility program. And others are looking at it as an abatement process. I haven't seen anyone roll those out actually yet, but that's what their committees are discussing. So they're sort of
Well, no, I just want to reiterate that point there too. I think this whole thing, as we're looking at this, or to the keep it simple, stupid thing is the greatest thing, because that's going to get this out the fastest. That as we start getting this all bogged down into a lot of minutia and stuff like this too, we're just going to keep waiting and keep getting this down the line.
I think it's important to look at it like, okay, let's say we can give every resident one. Is that everybody that's got a driver's license here that?
Household.
You know, are you looking at everybody that?
We'd have to do it by households.
Yeah, so you do it by household, and like, so for me, 3/5 of my household is residents and live here, but they aren't even in the state. And that comes back to you really gotta look at the criteria, and what do you wanna do? Do you wanna put it to the businesses and the people that are here in the community? Clearly, some of the rules we have are corporations and things that aren't owned by Alaskans, you know.
Councilmember Buckland?
Luckily, last year for the PFD, everybody who got a PFD got registered to vote. I mean, there's some people who don't apply for the PFD, I know, some don't, and because they don't want it, but, I mean, that's a large amount of the people here, and it would leave a smaller amount to verify their state, their residency here. So if we took maybe a voter registration or a PFD registration, and then that would create a smaller group of people that would say, I don't get the PFD, but this is my verification that, you know, I worked here, have a pay stub or whatever, and that may work as well. So, I mean, I know the household would be easiest, but at the same time, if you're looking at verification, maybe that might be the best way. I also had a question. So the total funding, you know, we talked about backlog coming back, the money coming back. When you have the money, say, I talked to some businesses who are like, you know, I don't know if I really need the funding. And I said, well, you know, you might need it later. So maybe you might want to still apply. Also, we need to get the money spent. So that also is alarming to me when people say, oh, I don't have, you know, I might not spend them, I might not need the money. You might not need it now, you might need it later. But if there are businesses who are saying, well, we don't need this money, and then that money comes back, is that then redistributed through another process?
We want to make sure 100% of every dollar that we can obtain from the government entity is expended in our community. How it gets divvied up is really up to the program. So yeah, we do want to get to the end and make sure.
So it would go back and kind of like the same format that
Could
it
go
went
into,
the first time.
the businesses, could go to.
If one went short or
Sure,
the other.
sure.
I see, okay.
So does that mean that, I know in some type of budget, we move things between line items. If we run short in one and the other one runs long, can we move those funds between this? Or we're not gonna set this in stone then?
So the big thing on this is you have to expend 80% of that first check. It's just, the accounting, it's not gonna be like our line item budget where every department needs to be like within their parameters of budget. This is a whole program. So for us to get into the next phases, we need to make sure some capacity we're getting loans out. And the sooner we get to 80%, the sooner we can claim that next batch.
Grants.
And then they'll send that next check, and then we try to whittle through that. So as we get to the end, the accounting and the finances are going to be very critical.
This is just my opinion here too. If we're looking for, with our individual assistant grants, I feel, and I don't know, maybe something we can give him more direction for, I think that should be going right to utilities.
Yeah.
I think that's what we should come back with, is something to distribute that for the utilities.
Yes,
Councilmember Cease.
not everybody has to pay their utilities, though, and they're hurt in other places.
Some people have it included in their rent.
Rent. Right.
Two little bits that may help folks. When it comes to the distribution, and again, you're looking at concept, and this is great discussion, trying to figure out what you want to put where. But just so that you know, your first distribution is only $1,470,626. So you don't get the second amount until you spend 80% of that first 1.4. And then the second piece of money is exactly the same as 1.4, and then the third amount, okay? So that's part of, I don't want to call it a game, but that's part of the balancing act that you have to do when you're doing this, is making sure that and my suggestion would be, your number one thing has got to be your businesses and your individuals. The money to backfill the first responder and incident management stuff, that should come out of the third check. That should not be coming out of the first one, because you want to push all that money out. The other thing I wanted to throw out, when you were comparing and saying, that some dollars weren't, the business dollars, the amounts you thought were low, just so that you all know, from the borough perspective, their numbers are, if you have up to $50,000, between $20,000 and $50,000 worth of gross revenue, you're going to get a check up to $1,500. $50,000 to $100,000 is up to $4,500. $100,000 to $250,000 is up to $11,250. $250,000 to $500,000 is up to $17,500, and then above $500,000 is up to $28,000. So
That's the
these are a
borough.
lot low. This is the borough,
Because
right?
they have
For
37
unincorporated-
million.
Right.
But Kenai was the same. Kenai, on
The
page
same.
3 of their plan, they say 220, that's what we matched, was the Kenai.
Yeah, we just templated after them, so if you want to
Yeah.
double those numbers, if you want to go with something like what the borough's doing, that's really what this discussion is more about, is what feels like the right, it's hard, Jason's here, he knows how many, it's hard, because it's hard to look at, this is for in-city, so like if you take all the in-city and do estimates on it, you don't want to have a number that's way too high that's not approachable, so you can raise those if you're low. This is all pretty hastily put together pretty quickly. I mean, we didn't have any of this a week and a half ago.
But those numbers also, just so that you know, that's not just the businesses, that's also for nonprofits. So you'll see that although they're
Well, our nonprofits are different. That's on
Right.
page 192.
right.
But you did bring up a good point, because we do not have a 20,000 to 50,000. And it sounds like the borough has a 20,000 to 50,000.
I think part of the discussion was they felt less than 20,000 really was a side hustle or a hobby, or it really wasn't. You couldn't make a living. Yeah, you couldn't make a living on it. So that's why I believe they went at that level. Plus, the other part too is, I think, and you might be able to help me with this, I think if you have $20,000 worth of gross revenue, it equates to $600 in taxes that the borough would get.
So you don't want to refund them.
Yeah, so
more than they
that's,
paid.
yeah, they're actually,
So, let's
There's a
take a
question
couple,
over
let's,
there.
so Michelle, you were first, and then there's a couple other, did you still have a comment?
I do, so I have a lot of comments.
Well, let's stick to the amounts that we're trying to discuss.
So, I don't think taking it from the utilities is a good idea because there's too many questions about the utility rates and the changes that have been made. There are too many bills that are outstanding. The audit wasn't done. There's too many disputes still out there. And I think if you start applying this money to people's bills that are in dispute, that's not a fair way to distribute money. Because I know my bill is one of them, so that wouldn't be cool. And isn't there a triage hospital already set up at the Avtech gym? So why are we talking about having to save money to upgrade and prepare for potential potential COVID outbreak or, something, for something else to happen in December when it's already set up and ready, we're already ready for it.
Sure, it's kind of like Tony saying, I'm good, my business is fine today, and all of a sudden this kicks up here and the whole state goes nuts and we all get sick and everything's closed for 3 more months. Is everybody still gonna be good then? I hope they are, but that might change the whole dynamic. This money is to get us to January 1st. We don't know what the fall is gonna look like. We don't know the businesses that are gonna need it. We're trying to get it out there and help as many people as best we can. We don't wanna put the money into people's hands that are really profiting off of this whole thing and prospering right now, right? We wanna get it to those people who are like, I'm using my credit cards and I'm blowing my business and I'm not making my rent and.
Okay, so
I think the question was specific.
I have 4 credit cards maxed out, and so why would you, we've had no races. Parks and Rec has a huge budget for t-shirts. Where is that money gone? What have you used that money for? I mean, they have a huge budget, and so has all that money gone to feed the seniors? Where's that money at?
So let's try to stick to this. Are there comments to specifically to how the funding's being allocated? Tara, do you?
I just wanted to comment that with the individual assistance grants, it kind of sounded like from the attorney's comments that there might be a federal subaward issue going on here, that there's a lot of roles. I can volunteer some expertise if there's interest in that. We do a lot of federal subawarding, and I personally used to do that, so just keep that in mind. But it is very time-consuming, and documenting it is very challenging. So I really kind of like that idea of changing this over to an individual payment, which is, I think, one of the things Valdez did. The federal government did that as well. And from an administrative position, it sounds a lot easier.
And then, did you have a comment?
I do have a comment. As opposed to how the funds for small business are going to be distributed. I've talked with Tim at length about this. When all this whole thing came down, and I was working closely with the Small Business Resource Center, it was drummed into us, go to the SBA, take advantage of these programs. Well, I did, and several other business owners did, and that precluded us from getting any grants through the state and the Alaska CARES Act. And under this program, it says the recipient of a grant of this program precludes eligibility for any other grant programs. Now, the state of Alaska has received $100 million for fisheries that came through the Federal CARES Act. I'm not going to apply for this because that's going to preclude me from anything that happens under the federal funding for fisheries programs. And there's going to be a lot of businesses that are not going to apply for this because it's going to preclude us, as it did with the SBA, for getting any future relief.
So is there a way to stage that where those can be applied for first and then they can put in their application by September 25th to us? Because we won't have that same restriction as it's proposed now.
Unfortunately, the only thing that's going to correct some of this stuff is our legislature going back to Juneau and putting some things together. I actually was called today about testifying on Wednesday in front of House Finance next week. They're trying to push the rest of the legislature to go down there and fix this thing. Having said that, it's all a timing issue, which I think is ridiculous, but you can get away with, like, for example, if you've applied for PPP, gotten PPP or EIDL, and you've already gotten that, now you can go ahead and apply for a city thing. But it's the timing, and you're spot on. Everybody did what they were told to do and apply for EIDL and PPP, including our elected officials down in DC where whether you need it or not, apply, and then all of a sudden you get $1,000 and you're ineligible for all this stuff. So you've got to be really careful, and that's something that we've been coaching the communities, when they roll these things out. So it's a good thing that yours isn't out yet, and that's part of the reason why people are taking their time. And the other part too is the Department of Law, again, as I said earlier, they've been changing what you can do and what you can't do. We were told by the Commissioner's Office that if you repaid your PPP, you would get your eligibility back. Then the Department of Law stepped in and said, whoa, no, you can't do that. But unfortunately, it was 10 days after the Commissioner had told us this is what people could do. So you've got people that sent their PPP back thinking they're getting their eligibility back, and now they're being told, sorry, you don't have this, and by the way, you sent that back and we're not sending it back to you. So you have to remember, all this stuff happens so quickly and it's so fluid. But you're spot on
I
with
see
your
another
assessment.
hand out here. Chris?
Yeah, so just going back, I actually think of supporting the kind of the proportions. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Kind of supporting the proportions because, you've got to start somewhere. And, there's been a lot of thought put into this as far as the, what Scott was directed to do and all of those. The one comment I kind of had was on the utility allocation, thinking about, well, let's just give utilities. The individual is that not every individual in our community that is paying utilities needs that. There are a lot of people that really need help in a lot of different ways. I would suggest that the money goes to them and they know where best to spend it. Where their stresses are in their life. It might be school loans, or it might be their mortgage, or it might be their car payment. And that, like you say, their rent might already be, the utilities might already be in their rent. I wouldn't even apply for it. I don't need utility help. I've been able to work through this. So there's, I would rather see it go to those individuals that really need it. And rather than just kind of a blanket decision by the city to decide where people need it, or where they can help. But that would be my thought on that individual part, but finding a way to get that out to those who really need it.
I like this distribution there, starting at 50,000. I think that's good.
Okay.
I think, yeah, so getting back on kind of what we're talking about here too, I think that's good to start at 50,000.
And then, one thing, since we're looking at these amounts, Sea Life Center.
I have a question.
Yeah, Councilman.
We've gone back and forth about our CPV funds and what they can be used for. My question is, do we know what is in our CPV account currently?
Yeah, of course, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but we
So I
have
called
last
Sam
year's.
today and it was 1.8 million. 200 and something thousand, so let's just estimate around 200,000 goes to fire and police and medical, emergency for what they do, their services that they provide. So they expect that payment in the beginning of the year, so that hasn't posted yet, so that's 2 and another 2 from that for next year, as well as another 200,000 for the bus contract probably next year we'll have to pay again.
So that's 600.
Yeah, so 600 from the 1.8, maybe about 1.2 or 1.1. And now that we're not gonna see any of the cruise ship the CPV funds for this year, was there any plans, currently right now for the money that we had?
So I would say this council directed how that money was spent. We're not gonna get any revenue this year at all. So those additional funds are gonna need to carry us through next year as well. The bus is running, they are operating. The council prepaid that last year. So there's gonna be some carryover to next year hopefully. But then again, the bus operator has tons of expense. But the CPV funds, I mean, obviously I don't wanna not respond to the questions, but I think, that's a totally outside of this realm issue. It's not related to CARES fund money, so.
I think
don't
it's
know,
under
I just-
discussion as it pertains to the Sea Life Center. Am I reading between the lines?
Yeah, I'm wondering how we can help the Sea Life Center still, but not take too much out from the CARES funding. And if what Tara is asking for is $500,000, if we were to take a portion, we also talked about the proportions, and maybe Tara can answer this better, about the proportions of the nonprofits and how they they're a little more larger from the $50,000 in legal and to get a $10,000 grant is a fifth of their budget. So, I mean, I get that one just seems a little large. I feel like a lot of our nonprofits actually might fall under that, however. At what point do we have so we have 9, you said?
So I'm counting.
We have that many?
So we only have 9 major ones.
9 major ones, you have 60 total. The other thing is too, to remember is, it says up to $10,000. So it would give you some flexibility too, as you look at things.
That's on page 192.
Yeah.
Well, just, all of the bullets say up to.
Yeah, up to, this way you have that.
I don't know, maybe if we could get some information back at the next time we talk about this, about the CPV fund specifically for the Sea Life Center to make that up.
That's up to council, I don't know.
Yeah.
Where would we get that information? Because, that's been my question all along, whether those funds are able to be used for the Sea Life Center. Very specific, it's a state mandated.
And I would take this off only because it's really.
I think you're social distancing.
Yeah, so I'm having a hard time projecting, but, of course, the CPV fund is not as clean of an analysis as it once was. We have a state statute that tells us what we can and cannot spend it on. I think arguably the Sea Life Center would fall within that definition. We had a case come out of Juneau a bit back in the federal district court where they challenged the expenditure of SPV funds, the use of those funds on things like a statute and other improvements that served the passengers of the vessels as well as the community. And they found that that was a violation of the tonnage clause at the district court level for the federal government. The reason why that's important is an agreement was entered into between those municipalities and the Cruise Ship Association. Under that agreement, they basically, and it's been a while since I've looked at this, and we have a memo I think we sent in the beginning, so I'll send that back out just so you guys have it fresh in your minds. But they basically said if you're in your harbor or your Port and Harbor district or a district similar to that we're going to be, you go ahead and use these funds. And so as long as you stay within the audit criteria and the use criteria in the state statute, which we would be, you'd be okay. But that's an agreement that isn't between obviously the city of Seward and the association. So we can tell you what the outside and the inside boundaries of spending would be. And then if this is something you really want to pursue, I think it's something that we could probably just talk to the association about and say, you have this agreement with other communities, and we think these funds, you know, we think this falls within the intended use. I mean, and that would be, so it might not be instant. I just want you to, you know, it would take more time than just, is it in or is it out? But I think it's something that your district should follow up on. That's a long answer, I know.
Councilmember O'Connor, would you be interested in that?
Yes.
Yes, I think that that's, if it's legit, I'm all for it, but, you know.
Yeah. I want to say too that I think in that other case specifically, it was a blatant use of misspending. It was a statute and some other, you know, I don't know. I think that I feel that the cruise ship passengers benefit a lot from having that activity here. You know, I think that's one of the main reasons why they want to even stop here, with what's the difference between coming here and going to Whittier at that point.
There's a huge difference.
Tony, that sounds like something I would have said, in trouble for.
Okay, so still going back to, well, I will stand up for, you know, the nonprofits. I mean, I'm looking at this list. When we distribute money to nonprofits, that's also how we're getting money out to the citizens. I mean, Seward Senior Center, hospice, you know, American Legion, the Volunteer Ambulance Corps. So it's not just padding their staff. I mean, that's also, and we're gonna have some major, you know, social issues we're gonna have to work on, and getting funds into those systems are important.
And the discussion why their monies are bigger was because business entities support them, right? So if my business is doing poorly, I don't give to those nonprofits. So their revenues are not only diminished by their operations, but by those businesses that support them. So that was the theory of what the other groups that worked on this put together. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you can't give some direction here, like, hey, we want to change the numbers and figures, and we do want to put those dollars in the hands of the businesses and people that need them.
So there's two business owners in the back that I might just ask, have you seen the amount, the breakdown amounts at all? You've seen those? So it's $2,500 for businesses with 50 to 100,000, $5,000 for businesses with 100,000 to 250,000, and $7,500 for businesses with sales of more than 250,000. So it really isn't making businesses whole, it's just providing another shot in the arm. I don't know, have you been able to take advantage of any other funding? No. You should get to know this guy, Tim Dillon, too. Holly?
I do want to make one point. A lot of communities have only been putting on their materials sort of a, we're not responsible, this may foreclose you from getting other funds, we're not responsible for doing that. I think it would behoove council to think about going a step further. People really don't know how those play together, and not that you have to spend a ton of time telling them exactly, but there were some astute comments in the audience, there are significant ramifications, and being able to at least identify or bullet point out those on the application could really save a person from losing a lot of aid.
So could we change that then in this one, that about the preclusion that we have in here, that it may preclude instead of just it does preclude?
Yeah, and I think, so you have two things you're considering, because one of the things, so your program, you may decide that by taking this money, that precludes them. But you may also decide that unless the CARES Act precludes them, you know, and then we don't want to go any further than that. So I think you're right. I think it's a combination of saying it may preclude, and then maybe adding sort of a list of, I think there's some language in the amount if we steal it.
So, yeah, there is. Okay. And then it includes initialing and just
So part of our problem as the city, right,
Oh,
is we want to qualify these entities and businesses to get checks. We don't want to really know what they're doing with, we want to get a general idea, did you use it for rent, did you do this? We don't want to get into the auditable, oh, I used it to buy things that are not allowable under the act, and we want to distribute the checks out. We don't want to get feedback that precludes them from usage of the money that's detailed. They can't do that with it. So we'll create the outgoing list. It is a W-9, so this is a tax implication to everybody that gets it. And some people might be like, I don't want to have that tax implication, and that's a choice to them. But we want to make sure they're aware of those things, and that, we hope this doesn't preclude anybody. We just want to help. But it may, and so it's really, we're not tax experts, we're not advisors on that type of things, but we do want to make sure, like Tim said, you do the other one first and then you come to us. We don't really know all of that as the city.
Madam Mayor, if I may, since we're down here at kind of working in the conclusion area, two things really quickly. One, thank you very much. This is a great document. It's getting us pointed in the right direction, everything else too. But my last question, and I'll shut up there too. From what I've read, if we do change even the preclusion, and even what we have in that preclusion right there too, we still have it set up right now where someone could apply multiple times. Because that preclusion says from any other grant program. So the way we have it set up is someone could actually send in multiple applications.
So there's a statement in here.
As far as I say, unless I missed something.
There is an exclusion, so like if I own 5 businesses here, and it's all under the same bank account, it's all under my same withholding, there is an exclusion where they have to be separate businesses, they can't.
Right, but if I have one business, I can apply multiple times. Unless we just don't have anything in here that says this is an application. Yeah, you can't do multiple applications. Yeah, it's the only thing I just don't see in there.
It's kind of like a you understood, I don't think it's in there.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure that
Yeah,
that's an item that we double check to make sure it's spelled out.
But getting to the other point though, if you have separate EIN numbers.
Yes.
If you have separate EIN numbers. The other thing that we've learned a lot about is a lot of folks that have separate EIN numbers and separate businesses, but they only have one bank account, then you only get one. And that's what the federal government has been doing.
Because the W-9 they have to have, that they bring in.
Councilmember Cease?
Well, with the W-9, they would be able to put, just so you know, they could put both EIN numbers on it, but if you only want a bank account.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. So when you're saying that they're gonna pay tax on that by having a W-9, is that, what about the individuals? If we decide to give individuals, they have to pay tax on it?
My understanding is it would be similar to our PFD and how
It says in your tax.
But there is discussion going on right now in DC on all these dollars and what the tax ramifications are. And the bottom line is, we've been told, don't talk taxes because we don't know. No, we don't know. They're trying to maneuver things, but worst case scenario is they are gonna pay taxes. So they should be at least told that at this stage you're gonna be paying taxes, unless it's altered.
So amounts we're happy with? Distributed to businesses, it matches Kenai, not change it. I would like to hear more though from businesses once before we go to adopt this, looking at the amounts.
It would be real easy for us to change that.
Yeah, it would be good to hear.
It's hard to know without knowing, taking all the estimated revenues and our tax. You really have to project, hey, how much of this is gonna get spent. We wanna use all of it, but you also wanna expect that everybody who's eligible that isn't gonna have some tax implication, we hope they take advantage of it. So we wanna project how much would that total be. It's really hard to do that without crunching some numbers. And if we can raise that amount, because we're not gonna do it, we certainly would wanna do that. For the category at least, or if not expand the category a little bit.
Let's look at exclusions. So one thing in here that council really needs to understand is the second to last bullet says businesses that lack a permanent physical presence in the city for the sale of goods or the provision of services with at least one employee assigned to that facility. Which it reads funny.
Yeah, it does.
So they have to have a physical presence inside city limits.
So what about charter boats?
What would this tell
I think
you?
it's the physical presence, I think maybe what
The
you're.
vote would be the presence.
Yes, it's the remote, it's the,
So what if
dare I
the-
say, Amazons, and, you know, it's sort of that, you have
So-
like a remote.
So a transient slip, or would they have to have a berth?
Or just the boat that does the
Or
business.
just the boat that pays their taxes and?
Yeah, if they have the business.
So, dependable janitor doesn't have a physical
There's another.
presence at all.
Yeah.
They have a storage unit, and that's it, because they go to the buildings. So, would that count?
I think so.
I don't think, yeah, I think physical presence generally, and I'm not sure if this was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have
A
physical
storefront.
property. Yes,
Okay.
it means that you're boots on the
Business.
ground working within the
Okay.
city. You have a
Yeah.
business license, your boat comes out of here, and you may be on the road the whole time catering to your clientele, but
You're
that's physical
generating
presence.
sales tax and business here, so you're entitled to that.
And that definition usually stems from a tax definition, so that's how we get, and it's a similar, because they are paying taxes. Yes, okay, yeah.
Take the word permanent.
Now that we're still on the business piece, I wanted to know from Jason how he would feel about the chamber managing the business allocations.
I don't know how to consider it before. I mean, I guess I consider like playing a role in it. Obviously, like I think it would require like us to, like anyone else, to have additional resources, because that, like, we're super busy the way we are, and so like we're just like anybody else that would require some kind of additional person to do either the task that we're doing or to do this task type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's like, in my mind, when you mentioned that earlier, I was like, oh, that would be the conundrum of kind of the situation. So, I mean, we'd love to help businesses and help do that in any way we could, but that would be our really sticking point. And to do it quickly would take kind of a major shift from us, in the middle of like planning a lot of things, and so I would love to be able to help, but that would be like how would I make that work is my question, that I'm asking myself.
Our anticipation is when we do get to bringing this back, we want to have applications so you can look at like, what are the criteria, like some of the other entities have had check boxes like, you know, Joe's gonna get this money, he's gonna sell his business, he's gonna take a boat somewhere. That's not the intention. The intention of this is try to help those endure through so that we retain our business climate and help those businesses that contribute to the community.
What is the deadline that we have to have a resolution approved to be able to accept the time?
So there really isn't. You need to have your application and we need to extend and turn everything in by December 31st.
Not because for the city to receive this fund.
There
That's it?
really
Okay.
isn't.
Okay.
So a lot of the communities haven't done the resolution to drawdown. That's where I was getting at the last meeting. There's tons that have done the resolutions and put the money aside. They don't even have the discussion yet on any of this. So it looks like a lot of the cities have monies, but they're not prepared to do it yet. So we're kind of doing it all in one swoop, where we're trying to come up with a program and then ask for the resolution to get the money and already have a plan ready to go. But as it's changing every.
I was gonna say, Sonovia is a perfect example. They've had their money, they were one of the first ones out of the blocks to get that money and put it in the bank account. But, you know, Cassidy and I are just having discussions with her council now. So, again, I think that, you know, I think you guys are in a good position to get your monies from the state and you get your resolution taken care of it. You know, I get that on the next agenda, and get that part to start moving. But the rest of this, it's a comfort level. It's supposed to be a good thing, not a bad thing. So you want to make sure that people are comfortable with it and that they understand that, hey, you know, it's not perfect, but it's helping some folks. And Tony, I hear exactly what you're saying about the chamber, and I think there's a role for the chamber, and I think it's more on the education side and the connection. But I think more than anything else, it's a great opportunity for the city administration to build a relationship with the businesses. And I think that, you know, there's always a silver lining in everything. That's the silver lining in this thing. It hopefully will create a little bit more of a give and take between the administration and the local businesses and open up those lines of communication.
Okay, so, Tara?
I have some comments on the small business area, if that would be appropriate.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I have some also on nonprofits, but I'll wait till you get
That's
there.
when we're getting
So,
there.
I really like the item about the permanent physical presence in the city, as long as it's interpreted right. And I think that the point there is to screen out businesses that come here just for the 4th of July, or just for the Seward Holiday Craft Fair, or just for something like that. But that people whose business is in Seward would be in. So that was one thing that was kind of worrying me until I saw that. I have a little bit of concern about the idea that you're going to prorate the grants to stay within the available funding. If you then flip to the next page, 191, and you say the application period is open to September 25th, and you're going to distribute funds in batches as received. Those don't work together. So I'm not sure, I don't really have an opinion on the best way to solve that, but I think that if you do, if you're distributing funds in batches, it is first come, first serve, and you're out when you're out. If you do what Valdez did, and you have a very short deadline for your applications, and you say we have this much money divided by however many applications that are checked, and we expect the money to be about this, then you prorate. But I don't think you can do both of those. That's all I have.
I think you've made some very good points. I think the reason that you're trying to batch things the way that you are, and again, it's far from being perfect, but it's the concept that is because of what interpretations we're going to get next week out of the state of Alaska on things. And so what you want to do is, it's to some people's advantages to wait on it, but they also know that as you're waiting on it, the chances are, you know, that pot might be a little bit smaller, and you might be getting $2,000 instead of $4,000. So it's trying to find that happy medium, and I think, you know, it's a concept, and I think the administration can massage that, but it's really because we're not sure what other interpretations we may or may not be getting, and you as a community get, and how you go ahead and implement that.
Let's move on to nonprofits, starting on page 192. And Councilmember C says, noticed on the first line, it says the grants for nonprofits would be divided into, it needs to say 4 levels.
Yeah.
So we have 4 levels outlined. Comments? Tara, did you want to go ahead? Sorry, I looked around for a second.
I have quite a few here. And I'm not speaking from the Sea Life Center at all now. I'm speaking as a private citizen who has been treasurer of a number of nonprofits in this town and elsewhere, and I know a lot about nonprofits in general. So Tim said, quote, "No one becomes whole," unquote. In the nonprofit section, that you are giving many nonprofits the option to become whole here, and even more than whole. And I don't think that's the intention, but that's the way that this is written. And then the ones that you're giving money, you're benefiting in very wide ranges of ways. So I took the whole list of nonprofits on the IRS database with Seward addresses. And the percent of revenue of those organizations that you could get the 990 or the 990 EZ, which is the largest ones, there's 11. The percent of revenue that these tiers represents ranges between 1% and 35% of their most recent revenue. And when you're giving the Seward Arts Council 32% of their revenue for the year, and you're saying Katuchek Native Tribe 13% of your revenue, are you intending to be that different in how you're looking at these? And then, are you intending to give Iditarod National Historic Trail the same level of funding that you're giving Seward Area Hospice? So I think, and then the other million on the sheet that do the e-postcard that you don't get any information publicly about their revenues, you're giving them up to $10,000. And the way that this is written is this is not supposed to be competitive and it's not supposed to be reviewed. So the Rotary Club, which I am a Rotarian, could say, we had to cancel a fundraiser, which we did. We normally raise, I don't know how much. And we would spend it on this. Therefore, we were impacted, we need this money. But do we? And so there are a lot of people on the sheet that are nonprofits that you're saying up to 10,000 each. And I love nonprofits, I donate to a lot of them. But I think that the risk here is that you're giving money to places that you don't intend to. And I don't think you can count on people to say, well, that's not meant for me, so I'm not gonna apply. So I don't have a solution here, right? And so I've been trying to come up with a solution, but I think that this is something that needs some more conversation about what nonprofits are you intending to help. There's also a lot of larger ones that are in the healthcare area that may have already gotten a large amount of funding through different channels. And these shouldn't overlap. Like it doesn't necessarily need to overlap. So again, I don't have a solution, but I'm very happy that nonprofits were included in here. But I think when you make the statement, no one becomes whole, this is where that's breaking down. And you're actually making some organizations whole in a way that, or even more than whole, in a way that you may not intend.
Like, would this be a category that we'd want to have the Seward Community Foundation manage and have them come up with a grant application process to give money to people directly affected or that can address social problems due to the COVID pandemic?
If we do that, we're getting into the subrecipient piece again, which again, does not mean we can't do that. So that might be a great way to do it. And in fact, municipalities have actually made grants to other nonprofits. But when they do that, they're looking at the mission of those nonprofits and often trusting that they will then distribute the funds in a way that is commensurate with their goals, or they'll make a mission statement in essence. So I believe, didn't Homer give to the Municipal League a grant? And so things like that. So I think you can do that, but just so you know, we would have to frame it in a way that fits the
So
easy allocation.
that's kind of my intent when I heard that the individuals are not really going to be easily fitting into that $1 million category, the 1,074,000. And I envisioned, I don't know how you do that, but you go to the foundation, you go to the chamber, you go to these entities and you say, maybe it is easier to say, okay, we're going to give this institution X amount of dollars, and we don't want to know that it's going to XYZ, but we entrust that they are going to do that, and here's the allocation to give you. And then it would be easier to come up with like a list that this council or whoever determines. That's why I wanted to keep it out of the administration and the staff side, but come up with a solution together. And we can do that, but to allocate those funds and maybe earmark them for each individual, like the council, the community council, and say, okay, maybe we are giving them $250,000 and entrust them to spread that out where it's best used in our community. So that's kind of where that earmark is intended to go, and it was intended, well, maybe that's gonna go to individuals or this or that. You can't just easily re-subdivide it down, and we don't want to see that feedback for tax implications.
And the great thing about the foundation.
My question is because we have like one large nonprofit here that umbrellas many nonprofits, how does that then work? And or nonprofits that are based, is the Boys and Girls Club based in Kenai? Or so
statewide?
Yeah, so then they're umbrella then here. So are they eligible if they're under an umbrella from somewhere else? operate here?
I mean, I think, at first blush, I think you can create a grant to a foundation, like the community foundation grant, and put some specifics on, you know, providing aid to Seward, residents and visitors, or, you know, you can put some parameters on there. I think that, and I don't think that we would go so far as to create this other relationship that might be difficult for them and for the city to manage. But that's my first thought is, yes, I think that's a great idea. I think you could say what you want to use it for, and then you just give them the money. You know, and then they would create, because I know Community Foundation, I know they have location-specific grants. I've seen them, you know, for other nonprofits, and they have industry-specific grants. So I feel like that would probably be a very viable option.
Jason, did you have something?
Do we know if this applies to only 501c3s or 501c6s?
It's all federal.
We say
I'm just saying because
501
501c6s.
nonprofits.
It can be any nonprofit. And again, going back to what they keep saying from the state, the municipality or the city can make up their own set of rules of who this stuff is going to.
The reason I ask is because 501c6's chambers have been excluded from every other single level of any type of aid. And so that's why I was a little curious as to that one.
So supposedly, because it's coming through the city, that they're able to put together their own set of rules. So anybody would be eligible. The other
So
thing
let's look at our rules that we have on page 192. It says the grants will be available only to IRS certified 501 nonprofits. So would that include or no?
Yeah, they would include. There's
That would.
29 different 501Cs, right?
Okay.
I
So
think most notably, you would be including 501c4 and 501c6s. So there are political entities, nonprofit, political active, politically active campaigns and APOC group entities.
So the good news is that if they're primarily engaged in, so nonprofit organizations, teaching, instructing, counseling, indoctrinating religious belief, primarily engaged in political lobbying activities are not eligible in here. So that's good.
And that's why they got excluded before, is because they got grouped, the lobbying groups got grouped in with that. We were grouped in with them, so they got excluded.
But the religious nonprofits are able to apply as long as they don't only exclusively go out to their members. They can be, if it's community type thing through the institution, then it is fundable.
Christy, getting back to what Holly was saying before, I do know that over in Kenai, one of the discussions that I had with Paul was them going to some different nonprofits and saying, okay, put together a proposal for us. You know, what can you do to help, you know, benefit our community and you know, enhance the quality of living, and what would it cost? You know, you can do something like that too. You know, that's not out of the realm of possibilities. You've got to watch how you structure it and all, so that it's not, you know, you're hand picking. You know, but you can do it that way too.
So instead of having a program where they just apply, you could put out that call, hey, nonprofits, community, send us a proposal of what you want.
Almost like an RFP. You know,
Yeah.
tell us what you can do and how much it would cost. And then you can go ahead and choose. If you decide you're going to choose 2 different nonprofits, you're going to sit down and figure out, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and you're in charge. You can do that.
And maybe if you don't have enough demand in the community and that's what you want to earmark and allocate out of that, maybe you do allocate some of those differently. And if you have asks, maybe you do meet more of their ask than we would have just given in a flat rated.
So if you do a program like that, which just to dovetail on what Tim and Scott are saying, set up a grant program with criteria that's very specific. This is our, you know, Seward Cares program. You are eligible, we are looking for 5 grantee recipients who all meet these criteria, you know, suffered under COVID-19 losses, gives back to the community, and I'm rattling just, you know, idea, but you want to have, I'm trying to give you an idea of this very clear criteria-based program with very clean deadlines, and then you have another committee. So maybe it's your application process committee, but I'd recommend the committee is not just administration. If you're going to make a big decision about money like that and funnel it into a few nonprofits, I would see if the chamber could have a seat, or if some council members would be on that committee, just so that you have that balance, and then award the grant, and then you're done. So I think, do you know anyone who's done that, like, has rolled that up? Did you know do a grant program?
Yes, they did, but when they did that, they didn't use COVID money.
That was
The
before
city,
that was
yeah, I think the city or the borough took $1 million and passed it through to economic development and had them run it. Yeah, I think that's how they did it. But I talk to Ostrander every other day, him and Larry, and we can figure out how they're gonna go about some of this. And I do know that Soldat is playing with some ideas along the same lines, so.
So right now, our nonprofit is included in the $2,500,000.
It is, but that was before we learned about the individual piece, so I was almost picturing maybe you just do that as business, and then the other $1,474,000 is maybe.
It's turned into the nonprofit.
Yeah, but it's all entirely what you want. I mean, it's not. This is just kind of a template.
So if we change that $2,500,000 to business, would we increase the rates?
That's what I was thinking, is
To
if you have
distribute?
some type of a incremental thing, more like the borough, or double it. I was, this is weird, but as we met, we were like, these are good things for the council members and the community members to kind of be like, hey, we think you should do this, and then it's not just us proposing, it's more of like, hey, we have vested interest, and this is what we would like to see. Because this is just something that we put together, and it's like, hey.
Like for example, the permanent physical place, when we were talking, I was thinking of Tony, because the food truck idea, where would the food truck fit into that? So there's a lot of that stuff in here, so, give him some guidance and we'll have something back to you.
So, double what we're giving to businesses? I mean, I feel like we should start getting some things on paper.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I would just say, I know one of the things we're discussing is individual payouts, like to the individual. So maybe But
now the city manager said, since there's some details with that, he had just got done saying, like, the 1 million, that could be the nonprofit piece instead of the individual payouts.
So if you want them to specifically benefit individualized programs, that's where we get into the problem by giving it to the nonprofits. If you're supporting nonprofits because of their overarching missions, then we're okay. And again, when I say some problems, I mean heavier administrative needs, and we have to figure out exactly how we do this, that's all. It's just, I think if you look at the numbers and say, yes, we want this to go to individuals, yes, we want this number to go to nonprofits, and this one to go to corporations, I think then your administration can come back and say, we've got two choices for you, we found a way and figured out, we talked to people with experience on dealing with the subrecipient approach, and here's one choice and here's the individual choice, or here, you know what I mean, within those categories. I think that might be a good way to do it, just because it would be very frustrating for you if we come back and say, oh, turns out that's too hard to do, and we don't have an alternative for you saying, but we took your purpose and intent, and here is a program that fits that.
That's kind of what happened in Kenai. They said, oh, we're going to do this, and then they learned, oh, we can't do that. Now how do we reappropriate it? And we'll definitely bring those things back if we can. Yeah, some of the smaller ones are just like, hey, divide it up by X amount, and everybody gets this amount, which makes it super easy on us, because then we just, pull up the eligible ones and send them a check. But you really want the most good to go to where those that supply the most. You don't want to give equal, just proportionated pieces to everybody. You want the ones that, produce more jobs and produce more revenues for the community, you kind of want to reward them more. That's why you see the tiered proposal. So if you want to double that, that's fine. If you want to do more of a program and just allocate the monies to them, we could figure that out.
Comments, desires?
But they have to, one, say that they were affected by COVID-19, and two, they have to say how they were affected. They can't just say, oh, I'm affected by $10,000. Okay, yeah. They have to kind of say, well, we lost, this is why we lost the $10,000. Or, you know what, we lost $5,000. And so that grant can be up, we can go up to 10,000, but maybe they would only get 5,000. But that's in the process that's gonna be happening there too.
The other thing that I have really found very, very, a real positive thing is not just on this piece, but also on the Alaska Cares. People have really been thinking of their neighbors, so they haven't been inflating their dollar amounts, which I have found very refreshing. But, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it's a good way to do it.
Member Buckland?
I also have heard that, because like I said, there have been business owners who are like, we don't really need it. I think there's people who need it more than us, and I think there is some honesty in, happening, and I love seeing that too. But I'm interested in what you're saying, because I think there was really no review process, right? Other than just analyzing the documentation. So there was no like, oh, well, you lost $5,000 because of this, this, and this. It wasn't that. It was saying, you lost $5,000, let me check your taxes and your numbers and make sure that's right. What the review was not on what you, and that was to keep away the liability from the city, right? So I see what you're saying, but it's not that, right? They're not saying you lost $5,000 because of this. They're saying you are qualified to receive this money.
No, I was saying the applicant has to say that, yeah, we are short this much because of the COVID-19.
Now, you gotta watch how you do that, because technically, once it comes through from the state to the city, then technically they can backfill, right? It's Alaska Cares business money that you can't backfill with, but you just wanna watch the verbiage on that. And again, the more you dig into it, the more liability, you're exposing yourself.
So what we're requiring is applicants are required to self-certify that they have been affected by COVID. And then it has some more things. But they will not be required to detail specifically in dollars how they have been affected, and a short reference on how they might use the money, making clear that the application question is voluntary and for informational purposes only.
And one of the things that I told Scott the other day is that, where you put that on the application, there's no more than one line. You don't want to read a book about it.
Exactly, yeah.
You just want, rent or, lack of customers or whatever.
And they have to state that they plan to remain in business in 2021. Yeah.
I like that.
Chris Sheehan?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts on that too, about thinking about sort of the funding being thought to be just directed to sort of make up for losses. So when you're in the nonprofit world, there's a mission to a nonprofit. And the community, the nonprofits are helping the community. In most cases, there's a certain mission to do that. So the community may have been really impacted, and the nonprofit may be functioning and able to address that. So if you restrict it to just kind of say, hey, it's kind of like your amount is, maybe you lost $25,000 because you had to buy a lot of PPE or something like that. If you restrict it to that, then it doesn't allow, a nonprofit to be able to come in and say, look, there's been some broader impacts to the community. It's our mission to address. We can help if the funding is available there. So there's been an impact to the business that we do, in that the demand is greater for the need for the services. So, just a thought there on, if you've got those types of restrictions, you might be holding up the possibility of these nonprofits to be able to address some of the things that are COVID related in the community.
Where do we want to go?
As far as
Dollar amounts. For any of it. I mean, we've talked a lot about different things tonight. Where do we want to go? So,
what were you thinking?
$2,500,000, have that just be businesses?
Oh, Right for the,
Okay.
I don't know, that's what I'm asking
Okay,
council.
hold on.
Do we want to double the amounts that we distribute? Do we want to leave everything the same?
I think we can, I think, like we talked about earlier, if we say that this is the process that we wanna go and look at what we wanna do, then we can go back to the numbers after. If that's what we were going to do, so that we can get more feedback from the
I think that's
community
gonna be the
before
big
we
thing, we're gonna get a
look
lot
back
of
at the
feedback.
numbers
so leave
and.
it as it is now and then do.
Between now and then, yeah.
Because I would hate to see like the individual assistance, we were talking about the individual assistance grants and that one, using that 1,074,000 as, you know, for something like that. And I know that was something that I would hate
Maybe if
to
we
take
could
that
get
away, you know, from.
Maybe if we could get a count or look at the voter registration or whatever, you know, some kind of better, I mean, the census is not gonna be done, right? So some way that we know what we're looking at if we were to break it down into a individual payment, direct payment to the citizens.
Yeah, looking for citizen comment. Yeah.
Okay, so we're back to just leaving everything as is for now. Yes,
So
Councilor.
he's talking about somebody being on the voters registration and stuff. Well, like with the permanent dividend, if you have 7 kids and yourselves, those people are probably hurting for some of the grocery money and everything, but I don't think that those 7 kids should get, I mean, in my mind, the same amount as.
So you're looking for a benefit amount, so if it was $1,000 and then whatever, and
Well,
then a less amount, you think?
I just think that if you're gonna give $1,000 to somebody there's 9 of them in the family, that's $9,000. And the people that are two kids and have a house, they're having the same amount of electricity and the same amount of things except for the food. I just feel that we shouldn't give it to every person.
Well, the federal government did do a decreased amount for children. It was what, half and half. It was,
I don't know.
yeah, like 1,200 for adults and 600 for children. It was a reduced amount for children when they're individual grants.
How do we get a correct amount of people?
That's a really good question, because like, what do you base that on? Residency, motor vehicle, voter reg, what if you're not a voter? What if you're a resident, taxpayer?
Well, the PFD was the one. That's why it was like, if you haven't registered for the PFD, that's.
So for the city, you know, we have access to our tax records, we can connect to the borough, we can do DMV. We have our voter registration list in the clerk's office, but we don't have access to like PFD data, we don't have access to a lot of that other individual stuff. It's really hard to determine.
Must be a household.
Yeah.
Instead of individuals that live there, have it per household.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
I mean, a single person may have as much expenses and everything as somebody with several kids.
We need to go back up and say, what's our goal?
Mhm.
What are we trying to accomplish?
I mean, if you really wanted to, you could say, hey, the community foundation gets the whole chunk. But you really have to entrust them to like, hey, you know what the vibe is, you can contact the community. I don't know, I mean, that just, again, back to that comfort level, what do you really want to achieve with this? I think the key is, you know, if I'm a business owner and I own everything outright, yeah, I'm losing a lot of money right now. If I have to pay huge rents and bills and mortgage payments and I can't do that, that person has more need than the other person maybe. But these programs are based on, do you qualify, how much taxation you get, and here's your portion. It doesn't equate into that, you know, one person's need versus the other.
Vice
Would
Mayor
it be-
McClure?
I mean, this is adding on more, but what if there was just a requirement for an application for that individual grant of X amount, and you have to prove your residence?
Yeah.
And that would be the household residence, like the main, you know, the head of the household, whether you're single or you have 20 kids, whatever.
I would
And
think
just
so, too.
a simple application, you show your utility bill or whatever, I don't know, some way prove your tax bill or something.
That's my first. That's the method when I think what would work the easiest. And I think the reason why we don't see that throughout the country is we don't have many municipalities that have the size population we
Right,
have. You're not gonna do that if you have 2 million people.
Right.
But for Seward, I think it might be very viable and you could keep it very simple.
Mhm. You just have to prove that your household is in the city limits, right?
Councilmember
Well,
Fox?
So,
It's for the city.
do you then, I guess I'm looking kind of at you two, do you guys have enough information right now to move forward?
I think we have good information, but the hard part is on the individual.
These two.
The individual's tough, because is it based on need, is it based on income?
Okay, so I'm just saying, what else do you need from us right now tonight to move forward?
I think it sounds like you guys are you're looking at the program as proposed as far as numbers go, and you're saying, bring us back pieces that would execute this. And I think that administration could do that, and we can assist with just making sure there's programs that are hopefully, and not gonna end up with a clawback. I think that is the biggest fear, is a clawback. And so you don't want one of those, and they've made it very clear that they can do that if it's not, so we just wanna make sure but otherwise this is really,
We're definitely
Fair,
we're gonna bring the resolution to get the funds encumbered, so we get the check coming, the first check.
So,
But I think you have to determine, do you want to do a call out to the nonprofits? Do you want to look at individuals? That's still kind of the grade 2 pieces on that. And then we can figure that out, but maybe have people talk to you and get back to us.
and I'd like to have more examples perhaps for that $500,000 city resiliency and recovery. I'd like to have more examples about what practically that is gonna look like. Because I feel like that seems pretty nebulous. And then the other thing is I think, I think council at least needs to look at an option of Sea Life Center.
That's totally up to you what you want to do with it.
No, I think, so no one's interested in looking at the CARES Act for the Sea Life Center where, for CARES Act, up to $500,000 as part of this money?
That's what I'm saying, like, reach out to all the nonprofits
Yeah.
and say, hey, once we get this encumbered and start moving forward, say, hey, we call out, what is your need? And maybe when you see what all those needs are that come in, maybe that's not an issue to do that with the Sea Life Center. But maybe you have more and you have to kind of have that discussion.
Mayor, what did you guys think about having 2 council members work with administration on this next? Just so that the micro on these programs is getting some. You don't have to do that, I'm just saying, I think that's a structure.
Before you bring it back, you mean?
Yeah, so that they're saying, oh, I see these individualized programs, so there are 2 council members that are very sort of educated and involved in what direction you went and why.
And we do have a budget committee, so maybe that committee, I don't know, just thought.
Utilize that budget committee?
Yeah.
There's one thing, when you see all those nonprofits that we have here, there's several of them that don't have any money coming in. And they still file the 990 easy or the postcard. And so they wouldn't get anything if they, for revenues, because that's on the wrong page, I'm sorry.
Well, but you're right, because it says up to $10,000 for nonprofits of less than 50, so it could be 0.
Yeah, so.
It should really say, do you want to have a lower limit on that? Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
I don't know, I just know that I've done some 990 postcards that have no income.
Right.
But to keep being a nonprofit, you have to do it. So, they shouldn't get any money.
And they may not apply it if we put.
Well, I know they might not, but they might. I don't know, I'm just saying, I just know for a fact that I do some 990 postcards and they don't have any money.
So, and I just want to clarify one thing, because I know we're like, well, we'll see how the money comes back, but once we set up these limits, once we adopt these limits and adopt these process, you would have to come back to council to change those
We would
limits.
set that by resolution, so we would still bring that forth to set it up. So I'm assuming that's gonna be, we don't wanna keep pushing it back. We wanna try to get someone with the capacity to help us get this implemented now.
So will you accept the money at the next council meeting and then
Or
maybe at a following meeting do accept some of this
Or
if
if we
there's
get it
still?
ready at like a special meeting to adopt. I don't like to keep forcing on the special meetings on you.
So I'll just look at the room if there's any other final comments. It would be great to hear from business owners on amounts. Go ahead, Tara.
From the Sea Life Center, I'm hearing in general that people want to support us, but preferably out of CPD, which is fine with me. What we're looking for, and will be soon, is some sort of a commitment, because what I'm planning to talk to the board about next week is going out, we have to go public with this. Like, the only way we're gonna fill our gap is to go public to the entire people of the state of Alaska. And so, you know, we need to get the borough on board, we need to get potentially the state of Alaska on board. If we decide not to operate, ADF&G gets pulled into this, so I'd actually like to have a meeting soon with the city manager and potentially the city attorney and ADF&G, and make sure we start understanding what that looks like, because we want to avoid it, not because we want to do it, but that will also bring the state of Alaska in to this conversation, and potentially more money. So I feel like the city needs to have some level of commitment so that you've got skin in the game, right? Like this, we're behind this, we can't fill the gap, right? We can't fill the whole thing, but this is important to us. And I don't know exactly, because, you know, you want to look at CPB, but I guess what would help me is if the city manager could be given direction to, which I think he did, to work on CPB, and I'd like to help on that. I've got some connections we can pull in from the board. But also, if it would be acceptable for there to be a joint conversation with us as partners with Fish and Game and start some of that process. To make, I think part of it is getting the awareness out there. And that's the way of making it real. Like, we're actually looking at the agreement that says, if we fail, this is what happens, right? Let's make this real. And, you know, it's a little scary, but I've had some discussions with board members today about, I think this needs to be on the front page of the Anchorage Daily News. Like, that is kind of a weird thing for me to say. Normally you try to avoid that unless it's a cute picture of a harbor seal or something. But I kind of feel like if we get the entire community of the state, like, and I'm not taking just the governments, it's the people, it's everything. I think we can fix this problem, but I don't want to go big and go public and have people come crashing down on the city of Seward saying, why aren't you supporting, right? So I think pretty soon, I'd love if you guys could get to a point of making a commitment so that we're going out together and there isn't a backlash of, well, the city hasn't been committed, right? And I realize you're not going to do that tonight, but I just wanted to kind of get that in your head. And if you're okay with me starting to work with some of these conversations with the state of Alaska, because that's rapidly going to get things up to the Commissioner of Fish and Game and up to the governor's office.
Okay, if we do the 500,000, can it be up to that amount? If you don't, we end up that you should open back up, you won't need that amount, correct? Shouldn't it be up to that amount instead of, we're just not gonna give you 500,000?
There is no way that we won't need that amount, unless there ends up being, you know, if this triggers up to Lisa Murkowski, and there is another federal act, so aquariums across the country are also working on the federal side, because we're in a unique position as an aquarium. We have to run our pumps all the time, and they don't stop, right? Doesn't that
That's right, I know that.
So if we get a federal bailout of some sort, then yeah, we wouldn't need it. But I think,
We'll go to Councilmember Osenga.
I'm kind of thinking that to commit to one nonprofit before we have a plan in place and we don't have anything going on is not something to do today. I think we need to keep it all together instead of going out and doing.
Well, I think there's directions, we're gonna look at CPB funding as a potential, and then also have the budget committee look at getting more information on nonprofits, businesses, numbers of individuals, all those things to try to get some more numbers. Okay. Is there anything else? Thank you.
Go back to the.
Yes, we gotta get
Thanks,
back to
Tim. Appreciate it. So next, we're going back to new business items, emergency ordinance 2020-006. We have a motion on the floor, and we were waiting for the attorney to arrive for a question. So, we're glad you made it down here, and no judgment. I know that the highway was closed because of an accident, so we're glad you made it safely down here. So I guess I'll go to Councilmember Kreitz.
I think the only question that I had was in regards to the wording in there that he was doing to be suggested about the mask mandates. And that, what we were talking about tonight is if we've adopted a code orange. And I think I had sent you an email saying that I was really in support of putting that back out to council. I know that Juneau passed a mask mandate recently, and I believe Anchorage had submitted that to council, but it did get rejected again. My understanding.
No, I'm really happy you asked this question, because I think council really wanted to see it as an encouragement, to look at it, see what that looks like. But the truth is, these are your rules. These things are not what they were. Our numbers are high, our metrics is out of whack with the states, and we have to do something now to protect public health and safety. These are an extreme condition set of rules. So if we have an encouragement to wear masks in our extreme rules, does that one suggest you're not encouraging the public to wear masks now because we're only adopting it as part of the outbreak rule? And does it muddy your rules because you have two rules, you have rules that are very much a mandate. We're in trouble, we're all going to hunker down again. And we encourage you to wear masks. So I'm a little bit worried that message, council has done a great job of sending the put your facial coverings on and we want to see you in them. And I think that's a message that can continue forward and be a consistent message without being incorporated into the outbreak rules, if that answers your question. I do think there's a lot of movement towards facial covering mandates. They are lawful. We can structure them. The previous version in the outbreak rules is in my opinion, a lawful facial covering provision, and if you have enough process on the front end, I think you do a very good job of staying away from violating substantive or procedural due process rights or privacy rights. But I think that does that well, and know that the federal court came out with a facial covering mandate for inside the courthouse, and their language is very, very similar because they're all tailored on the CDC. So if you want to bring that back, I think you and Councilmember LaPlante have that ordinance. I think you could literally just resurrect it. I think that it's legally very appropriate. As far as the discussion on the recovery plan, I would recommend you remove either mandate facial coverings as part of your outbreak rules using our previous version, or take that out as a recommendation and just maybe issue a resolution reiterating encouragement to wear facial coverings or something. We'll treat it as something more consistent.
So you're saying take out Rule 01 altogether?
Unless you want to make it a rule, unless you want to, when it's an outbreak, unless you want to mandate that people wear masks and facial coverings, which is very warranted at that point, right? Or any point, but then take it out. If you just want to encourage them, because so far the city of Seward has not drafted rules to tell people what you'd like them to do. Everything that you have mandated or set a rule regarding or ratified is something that people need to do. They've been required to do by local law.
And I just did want to say that my concern with this, and bringing it back up, is just this spike that we've seen on the United Peninsula recently. And as you know, we kind of, as things started to kind of lay off on allowing people to relax a little bit on everything, now we're starting to see, you know, I mean, Homer has 29 cases currently. And, you know, they were in the single digits before the rules relaxed.
But are they the
Councilmember Cease.
I'm sorry. So are they there in Homer or just residents, like the one that we just had on the Tusty? They're a resident of Lowell, or, excuse me, Seward, but they're not here, they're in the Tusty. So when you add that on, that comes from.
I do think 5 of theirs are Tustamina, but the rest are local.
So, and you can separate out the facial covering and discuss it as part of, you know, I mean, COVID is still here, clearly. We have our highest numbers active cases that we've ever had. So it's still here, and discussing facial coverings can be a great platform to bring in medical professionals, so that we have a, you know, to talk about the why and how, and so you can treat it as a separate piece. You can talk to your city manager, direct him to roll it into, bring it back as an administrative, an ordinance or an administrative order. And then if he brings an emergency order with that rule, council can discuss whether or not to ratify it. Council, after the pickup order ordinance, so council has its own set of regulations. In that sense, that's a great place to put it. So really you have 3 choices. Where to put it, if you want to put it, or and have this discussion.
So right now before us on page 23 are the actual community outbreak rules.
Can I just ask?
Councilmember Buckland.
So what you're saying is, if we wanted to strongly recommend that people wear masks, we direct the city manager to bring back a resolution stating that.
I would rather have that than have it in your outbreak rules, because then it will strongly encourage them starting today, and they will be strongly encouraged to wear masks.
Councilmember Buckland.
I'd like to make a motion to remove Rule 01 facial coverings from the Code Orange plan.
I'll second. And with that motion, then the rules will be then amended and numbered. Any discussion, Councilmember Buckland?
I'll do it after, right?
Well, you made the motion. Did you want to
Yeah.
speak first?
Well, I'd like to make a secondary motion to direct the city manager to bring us back a resolution strongly
Well,
recommending the.
we should take care of this motion on the
Yes,
floor.
so that's what I said.
Okay, I see. Is there discussion for this? Okay, let's call for a vote.
Voting on the motion to remove Rule R01, Cease,
Yes.
Butts,
Yes.
Kreitz,
Yes.
Olsenga,
Yes.
Buckland,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
That motion is approved.
Okay, back to main motion.
So, so the question is then, if the city manager then determines of all the precursors that come in there too, and we determine that it is time for Code Orange, we right now have nothing that's saying that you should be wearing some kind of face covering.
Correct.
Right. So if we go into a Code Orange, do we feel as a city that we should be, because then that's now the next step, that we should be mandating that you should be wearing facial coverings at that time? Because if we go into the Code Red, or do we have it in the Code Red? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
The state has not really given us what the Code Red would look like. They have not. They've said we have red, yellow, and green. And I have interpreted that from looking through their vetting system, that red really was, or would be our strictest travel quarantines, maybe a community exemption order travel quarantine, and your health mandate 11, hunker down, you're adding on, and probably if it went there, a facial covering. But when the state started moving towards the five-phase program, they were really at yellow. That's what they said they declared themselves to be, sort of yellow. That was before phase 1A, that was health mandate 11. So they've moved now to green, And so we kind of have an idea of what those phases look like, but we're really, there's a lot of just trying to figure out what makes sense. So I would say, if we go to red, or if the state goes to red, if the state goes to red, we follow them, we go with them. The only thing we do different between the states green, yellow, and red is when our metrics get out of whack with the states, you guys declare code orange, and that means you go back to a hunker down simply within Seward. And that is the perfect place and the very appropriate place to put a facial covering mandate if you want one. Because at that point, when you march through the metrics, our healthcare capacity is strained, our testing, we're having COVID-19 positive cases, most likely a community outbreak. And so that certainly would be appropriate, and I think you may have, a lot of people, I know them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the healthcare community as a whole is getting very vocal about the benefits and the desire to have healthcare, facial coverings.
And I know there was a letter written by healthcare providers in Anchorage, and I wish that they had went out to the state to all healthcare providers, because I think you would have seen that 200 plus people that signed that were healthcare providers, probably 2,000, if not 20,000 healthcare providers signed that in the state, because we all are in agreement that we shouldn't be looking at masks if it's a code orange, we should be looking at masks now. And I go into Safeway and I see, local people mostly wearing masks, but not a single person is doing it. I mean, it's really discouraging, and I really would just like to see us at least say, if you're gonna be in a public facility, at least, to wear a mask. At least that little bit, if you're gonna be in a public building.
So right now, looking at our code orange, we will go back to the COVID health mandate 11, which shuts down all non-essential businesses and basically enacts a hunker down. So say in September, school's going, we call a code orange, school closes or not closes?
Health mandate 11 doesn't impact the schools, and generally the schools are going to be, usually that comes down from the state. We had that municipality, I think municipalities had to make a determination for a while, but then the state sort of stepped in with mandates regarding closures. What Health Mandate 11 does affect, though, is child care providers. And there is a provision, so in the critical infrastructure essential worker order, there is a exemption for any business with 10 or less people that can maintain 6 feet social distancing guidelines. So those businesses can continue to operate, and but you will have child care providers that are impacted by this. Child care providers servicing essential workers are included in the exemption. So that is why most of them are able to continue to function. But when it comes to actual, the school district itself, that issue would be outside the social distancing. One thing to think about too, not to complicate things, but some people on the mask coverings, the facial coverings, are looking at incentive programs. So one of the CARES Act fund appropriate place for your funds is to hand people gift cards for demonstrating great social distancing, or to give, so you can do things like that. You can come up with creative incentive programs if you're looking at ways to, to balance mandate with encouragement. Just to throw that out there.
Any other comments on this? Councilmember Butts?
Okay, so I'm trying to kind of wrap my mind around this one too. If I'm back into Appendix C about the Code Orange community outbreak rules, so if I go back to Appendix C, we have a facial covering mandate right there.
So when I first, the first draft of the plan had a mandate, and then council discussed it and said, could you bring it back as an encouragement? So that was council's direction, just to consider it. I think there was some, we would like to talk about what this should look like. So then the draft, the recovery plan draft that should be included tonight has the encouragement because it strongly encourages. And so
But even this one looks different than what we first, we adopted there too and then had reconsideration to before. Even this one looks different than that.
oh, yes,
Yeah, this
so
is-
there is an ordinance too. So when you had your motion for reconsideration, then the sponsors and I worked together to make sure that you had a facial covering provision that covered this, that stuck very narrowly to the CDC guidelines, included exemptions that I think are very important to protect civil liberties and rights to privacy as well as.
So
individual
after that
property.
reconsideration, this
Yeah.
is what you came up with?
So
Okay.
it's, yeah, so this one, it was a little bit different, I think, in the ordinance, but yes, this is sort of that. It's CDC, it's tight to the CDC guidelines and has exemptions that protect the needs of your community.
But what you're looking at was from our.
old, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you're looking at.
I'm looking at
something
appendix C
before.
way down,
This
yeah, I'm
is-
looking
this
way back
is-
there too.
I
we're
apologize.
not
I
adopting
think
this one, but this is the one that we had,
This is,
kind of, we came up with after the, yeah,
The new things are.
right.
And this new one from this plan is just, obviously, so the last was a mandate to a lot of exemptions. You know, you don't have to put a facial covering on if you're under 4 and you have a difficult time breathing or you have a medical reason not to. This one is a recommendation, so we don't need to say.
And actually,
when you're
we've already
exempted.
had a motion and it's out.
Yeah.
So we're not even
We just got
done.
rid of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the only other question.
Just, Councilmember Cease?
I was just going to say again, some people can't wear masks.
Yep.
And I saw somebody today that was a couple, and one of them had it on and the other one didn't. And I said, how come you don't have to follow the same rules as your husband? And she says, because when she wears it, she suffocates and she's passed out. You know, so, and she was working at Safeway, and now she isn't because she has to wear a mask.
No, and that was when I originally had proposed this, it was, and if you had a medical exemption.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments about these cold orange? Like page 7 talks about how it works. That was a lot of our discussion the last time. And so council shall either approve or deny the declaration via resolution within 48 hours. That's how that was incorporated. Failure by council to take action within 48 hours as shall constitute council approval. So that's in case we can't get together as a body. Copy of the declaration approving it, the community outbreak rules, and the effective date and time of the declaration shall be posted on the city website no less than 24 hours before the rules take effect. So people have 24-hour notice.
Like that provision, because in the middle of summer, who knows where we're all at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in here it talks about try to reach this, that the city will try to reach businesses, reach out to businesses too.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's take a vote.
Voting on the enactment of emergency ordinance 20-006. Cease?
Yes.
Bucklawn?
Yes.
Butts?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Kreitz?
Yes.
Osenga?
yes.
And Mayor Terry.
Yes.
That ordinance is enacted.
Yes.
Can I make a motion to have, direct the city manager to bring back an ordinance requiring the public and visitors to Seward to strongly wear facial coverings while in instances where they're maybe hard to physically distance from other people.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So just-
You meant strongly encouraged.
Strongly encouraged, yeah. Sorry, what did I say?
Well,
Encourage.
yeah.
Yeah. Any
I'll speak
discussion?
to it first. Because, you know, now we have taken it out. I don't think that mandating masks is what the community wants. I know some people do and a lot of people don't, and it's been contentious. And I think everybody will do the right thing if we just recommend that they do it, rather than require them to do it.
Councilmember Rosinga?
Do we not have that written in on our website and stuff that says I thought during,
Council has stated it numerous times. I don't know, is there anything, it's not.
I thought I saw it on the city
COVID-19
website where it
rules.
was recommended, strongly
I
recommended.
think the CDC, and we have all of that literature and information, but we don't.
I mean, it's not an official,
Just the signage is driving.
message from us, but I thought I saw it on, somewhere on there. Huh, okay.
Couldn't answer that, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay.
You know, there may have been statements, I think there was an administrator statement at one point, I think you
Yeah, it's right.
I think it's just bringing the resolution back, so we could, City Clerk, could you take a vote, please?
That was motioned as an ordinance. Did you mean an ordinance or a resolution?
A resolution.
Okay. So voting on that motion, Butts?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Kreitz?
No, I would like to see it as a mandate.
Osenga?
Yes.
Buckhorn?
Yes.
Cease?
Yes.
And Mayor Terry.
Yes.
That motion is approved.
Okay, next on the agenda is citizen comments. There's no sign-in comment period, but time is limited to 5 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak? The diehards that stuck through it all.
I just want to say something really quickly. I appreciate all of your time on everything. It has just been amazing. It was really nice to have something to look at for the discussion today, and so thanks to Tim Dillon, even though he's not here anymore, for helping. I know he helped you all pull that together. And thanks so many of you for looking out for the Sea Life Center. I don't think you should lump us in that nonprofit bucket. I think what you want in that nonprofit bucket is the nonprofits who can help the community get through the COVID situation. We're different. We're a facility owned by you that is having highly unusual financial challenges due to the situation. And there's a different liability for the city for it. So I encourage you to think of this as a totally different category. Because I think if you try to lump this in there, you're going to be making decisions about other nonprofits that, because you don't want, or do want them to apply to us. Does it make sense? So, we are different. I appreciate the partnership. Willing to talk to any council members at any time if you have questions. I reached out to you all and asked for a chance to talk. I will be trying to talk to the rest of you I haven't talked to just see if I can answer any questions and make sure you understand our situation. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'll just say, I'm just disappointed about the whole mask thing because I'm watching the news, like from down below, as they're talking about places to go. And I just saw this report of all the states that start with A. You don't want to go there, right? And we're a state that starts with A. And the reason people don't want to come here is because our numbers are going up. And by not mandating masks inside in public buildings, I just think that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater and cutting our throats in terms of any success this summer, especially with visitors from out of state. That's it. I'm with Julie.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Next on the agenda, council and administration comments. Scott, did you want to kick us off?
No, I just, I look for more input, community members. I appreciate what Sarah said. I do tend to agree with what she's stating. Maybe there's a way we look at that $500,000 for the, obviously the city, if we have to repair and this explodes, that's kind of the intention of that last phase, and maybe we do honor her request. I think it's important that we know where it's going, and I think this is all good stuff for the businesses and the community. It's good that we're even getting any kind of money into our community, so I think that's, as good stewards, we want to make sure that it's well used and it's all used. So thank you, and I look forward to working with the group and the community, and it'll be good to see where it goes. And thank you for your time. And these are not easy things to navigate, that's for sure.
How can the community get comments to you on the plan?
I think the biggest thing is just kind of, obviously the budget committee and working together to finalize this. They can always send emails, the websites, or contact. All of your emails are available. call. I met with numerous different business owners. I think it's hard with our workloads and the time, it's even hard to get out and talk to anybody, so I think, this will be an item at our meeting coming up for approval. So I think when we do go to approve that, hopefully we have it more right than we have it right now. It's gonna take some work to get there.
So phone calls or emails, if people want to email you, that might be the easiest.
That might be
because
the
then-
easiest, yeah.
Okay, good. Councilmember Butts, did you want to go next? Councilmember Osinga? Councilmember Prince?
I just want to thank everyone that spoke tonight. That was extremely helpful to hear from some of the business owners and the nonprofits. And in regards to the mask, I hope everyone will just kind of take a step back. And I know you said how people were not for it before. I hope people have seen that things are changing daily. Just since the state kind of relaxed their travel mandates in the last week, we've had a spike in the number of cases, particularly here on the Kenai Peninsula Borough. We've had 2 additional deaths in the state in the last week. So I wish that the public, would just take a step back and look at, we need to protect Seward and those that are really vulnerable to this virus. And a simple thing is wearing a mask. It's not that difficult.
Councilmember Osinga?
Bogdan?
I'm sorry.
I thought he'd already said no.
I want to thank everybody who came in and spoke today. It was very helpful to hear a lot more information about businesses and how it may preclude them from other things. That was very helpful. And thank you to Tim Dillon and the city manager and Holly for being here today, for clearing up some other issues that we have and we're going through. I do agree with facial coverings. I really do. I do feel that there's a large part of people that do not. And unfortunately, that we represent everyone. And it is so simple just to wear a mask. And I forget sometimes, and I go into Safeway and I feel really, really bad. And I feel embarrassed. And I feel like I should go outside and grab the mask, and I'm like, ah. And then I do. But when I do get into those situations, I feel bad because I know that I wear a mask for you and not me. So, thank you.
Councilmember Cease?
Well, I agree with Tony about Safeway. I didn't have my car the other day. I had grandsons, and my extra masks are all in the car. And there was nothing theirs, but I had to go in and get something. But I kind of close, and I'm just as bad as anybody else. I hate wearing one. But I feel it should be. It isn't for me, it's for somebody else, and I know that's what it is. But I do want to thank everybody for coming tonight, especially the audience. It was nice having somebody sit out there instead of that, even if she talked a lot. Anyway, thank you, and Holly and Tim.
Vice Mayor?
Oh, well, I wanted to thank Tim and Holly too, especially Tim. He's put a lot of work into this, and KPEDD is one of the gems of our borough. And it's nice to have people. I'm enjoying that. And I agree with the mask wearing. I do it in public places. I think what we had before was too overbearing, where you had to wear it in your own yard and in your own car. And I think that was the pushback primarily that we got. So if we had something a little more reasonable, I think maybe some of those people, because we heard from people, but I think that was part of the problem. It was too much, so just something to think about. But we're on our way to getting a lot of things accomplished here. This was 3 productive hours, and we heard from people, so appreciate that.
I want to bring up our next couple,
Go ahead.
I want to bring up our next couple meetings. So Tuesday is the city attorney interviews at 11 and 1, and that will be in council chambers, is that correct?
Correct.
And then I also wanted to ask council where this was kind of a tester. Do we want to have our next regular council meeting back at council chambers and then figure this out? I don't know how the sound went. I don't know if it helped to have people here. What does council think?
Personally,
Council, Vice Mayor McClure?
I think with the amount of work to get here, it was nice to have people, but that number of people could almost have been within the chambers and in the hall like we were talking before. So, and there was a lot of discussion right at the end of our meeting, once we decided to meet here, that there was a preference to be over there. So I wouldn't mind going back for our next meeting and just see how that goes. Just my, you know, I remember I had said, let's give it a shot for a couple of meetings, but let's maybe have the next actual meeting in chambers and see if it works.
Discuss it again.
Maybe.
Okay.
That's my thought.
Any other preferences? So our next regular meeting back at the council chambers, and folks would again have the opportunity to come and testify in person.
Right. Well, I'm thinking that we could have, how many people sitting in the audience? Madam Clerk?
Yes.
We could have 6. We had how many here tonight? 10?
We could have had 12, we could have done the same.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were about 10 to 12 people here.
I just, I know that
Councilmember
you're
Khan?
saying, I think that this was not a regular meeting,
Yeah.
and so we didn't have really any administration here. We don't have the lieutenant here.
Oh, there's that. I'm
So
sorry.
we are missing some people, so there was no, usually Valerie, the lieutenant, and some other members from administration are here. So if you take that out, I think we were over the capacity of where we would have been in City Hall. So I that's just my
Yeah, I didn't
observation of that.
But you did bring up the concept of having administration just wait and then come in, as they have been. If we did
So
that.
we'll continue to do that.
If we continued that, we still need the police presence. I don't know.
So, the reason I'm so the way we had it in the old council, in our council chambers, people were not allowed to attend in person and just sit and watch, but they could come and provide testimony, wait in their car and come in and provide testimony and listen to the radio.
Or in the hall.
Or in the hallway, were people waiting in the hallway?
Yeah.
Well, they came in advance in anticipation of providing their comments. Because they had signed up to provide comments.
So just generally though, people weren't just coming to listen to the whole meeting, sitting in the hallway.
Right.
No, because we hadn't opened it up for that.
So we're still going back to the pre-arranging, right?
To what?
The pre-arranging, like you either have to,
So-
that's why I want it to be really clear
I
what
see
we're
what you mean,
deciding.
Yeah, I'd like clarity.
So if we go back to council chambers, it's you write a letter that the clerk reads, or you write something that the clerk reads, you get a phone call, or you ask to be scheduled to speak in person.
I don't think we should do that. I think we should do the next meeting here with the amount of people that were here, not including administration, and we're gonna bring back the CARES Act if it does come back in a resolution at the next meeting, and we had that many people, not the next one.
The adoption of receiving the funds will come back, and then this program will come back as soon as we have it ready. Probably not for another.
I mean, now that people have more information about this funding, they might wanna be at the next meeting to provide comment. So I think if you think about the people who were here, plus administration, we'd be over the capacity of City Hall, back to closed meetings.
We would be.
So that's what Councilmember Osenka.
I was gonna say, we'd be over capacity here also.
Right.
If you're gonna anticipate that many people.
Yeah, but people could wait in the hall, could also be in the hall here, which is way more space than the hall in City Hall.
I would ask that maybe we find out if the library would be comfortable with us trying to get more people in this facility. I mean, I understand it is a city building, but they're trying to operate here also. So.
And can you expand on that?
Any idea when the main building?
Well, you have how many employees in this building? They've got their own measures in place to keep this place safe, and everyone's doing their social distancing in here. And I just think that if you're going to pack 20 extra people in here, I just think it could be a concern, that's all.
Any
What
other
are, what are
comments?
the current state capacity? right now?
I've told you, I don't know what else to say, it was just a concern, I thought maybe someone should talk to the library, that's all I'm saying.
I agree with that.
Any other comments?
No, I agree that the librarian should be consulted on that, I think, too. Just the amount of effort to get this put together with, I don't know, there was some pushback before, so. I'll go either way, I guess.
There she is.
But
No,
this
no,
is-
no, 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 we're not doing this right.
No.
Well,
No, this
let's,
is on the schedule.
we just need to, so let me just clarify again, because I want the public, my concern right now is I want there to be no misunderstanding for the public. So Tuesday, attorneys, city council chambers can provide comments for you to read, can call in. Will we be calling public during that time?
Sure, yes,
And then they could come and testify in person.
yes,
So
if
our
they
next-
sign up,
If they sign up, yep, through your process.
okay.
And then,
And what is the due date for that?
Well, it's 11 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, so end of day Monday, I would think, would be reasonable.
5:30 Monday?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock Monday, thank you.
Yep,
and then how about at our next regular meeting back in the council chambers, we have this discussion again? Okay. And then Councilmember Osinga, you had another final comment.
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot, I was gonna thank the radio
Oh, yes.
for setting up in here and broadcasting. Thank the local radio, and also thank the library and the museum for having us here.
And I guess I'm more comfortable having that next regular meeting, because I'd like to get more information on how sound was. I know it was great on the radio, but how YouTube was and all those things too.
Right.
And then,
Thanks, Linda.
all right, adjourned?
So I can hook this in your audio input, and then you can have the same,
Yeah.
can you just
you know,
help
next
us